Well, hello, everybody. This is Tim Green with Rattle Magazine. Welcome to Rattlecast number 268. Thanks so much for joining me. Joseph Millar, our main guest, is here. We got a big crowd on hand, too, on the Zoom already. Before we get, I should say that Rattle is a publication of the Rattle Foundation, a 501c3 nonprofit working to promote the practice of poetry. We've been a continuous publication since 1995 and are unaffiliated with any other organization. We just do all this because we love poetry. And you know you do, too, so please do click on the like button and share. Make sure you're subscribed. Ring the bell for notifications. Anything you can do to help spread poetry around the internet would be much appreciated. Now, as we always do, we're going to start out with our Poets Respond poets, and we have two this week because it is such a week for poetry. Or, we have a lot going on in the news, at least in the United States, which affects, of course, the rest of the world. And to talk about it first is Alison Luterman, who had this wonderful poem that was today's poem on Rattle.com. So, hey, Alison, how you doing? I'm doing great. It's great to see you again. And I know you always, you are one of the veterans of Poets Respond. And every time there's a big emotional, especially political event, I can almost count on a great poem from you. And this is a poem that resonated with so many people. I knew reading it was going to be one of those poems that I got a lot of feedback from in the emails once I sent it out in the daily poem. And we got dozens of people saying how much they appreciated it and how they're forwarding it to their friends and all that stuff. And it's great to have you here. So tell us how the poem that you wrote came to be. Oh, hey, hang on. I'm messing. Something is wrong here. 1 second. I don't know why. Bear with me. The Zoom wasn't showing up. Hang on. So the Zoom. 1 second, Alison. Yeah, the Zoom had an update. It's not now. Say something. See if it works now.
I'm here. Can you hear
Good.
me?
Yeah.
Right.
The my Zoom program updated right before the show, and it didn't catch the audio, but now it's got you. Okay. So tell us how this poem came to be and where it came from.
I did get a text from my cousin saying, just describing a moment when she was with her 15-year-old daughter or six, I don't know how old her daughter is, but anyway, with her teenage daughter, and she was so worried about the election and feeling a lot of anxiety, but she didn't want to say anything to her girl because she didn't want to freak her out and didn't want to distress her with her own anxiety. And she said something like, I thought if I were you, if I were Alison, I'd be able to describe this, loud silence, of not being able to, feeling all this stuff and not being able to feel it. It made me think about the Anna Akhmatova poem, that famous one where she's standing outside the prison gates and a woman asks her, "Can you describe this?" And she says, "I can." And then, the ghost of a smile flitted across what was once her lips, or something like that. I'm probably misquoting it, but, just the poet's job is to try and describe what's almost too big to put into words, was what I thought.
Yeah, well, you definitely did, and like I said, it resonated with a lot of people. It's our most popular poem, really, I think, in a while. So, do you want to go ahead and read it? Holding Vigil.
I would love to. Thank you. Holding Vigil. My cousin asks if I can describe this moment, the heaviness of it, like sitting outside the operating room while someone you love is in surgery, and you're on those awful plastic chairs eating flaming Doritos from the vending machine, which is the only thing that seems appealing to you dinner-wise, waiting for the moment when the doctor will come out in her scrubs and face mask, which she'll pull down to tell you whether your beloved will live or not. That's how it feels as the hours tick by and everyone I care about is texting me with the same cold lump of dread in their throat, asking if I'm okay, telling me how scared they are. I suppose in that way, this is a moment of unity. The fact that we are all waiting in the same hospital corridor for the same patient who is on life support, and we're asking each other, will he wake up? Will she be herself? And we're taking turns holding vigil, as families do, and bringing each other coffee from the cafeteria. And some of us think she's going to make it, while others are already planning what they'll wear to the funeral, which is also what happens at times like these. And I tell my cousin, I don't think I can describe this moment, heavier than plutonium. But on the other hand, in the grand scheme of things, I mean, the whole sweep of human history, a soap bubble because empires are always rising and falling and whole civilizations die. They do. They get wiped out. This happens all the time. It's just a shock when it happens to your civilization, your country, when it's someone from your family on the respirator. And I don't ask her how she's sleeping or what she thinks about when she wakes at 3 in the morning, because she's got 2 daughters. And that's the thing. It's not just us older people. Forget about us. We had our day and we burned right through it. Gasoline, fast food, cheap clothing. But right now, I'm talking about the babies, and not just the human ones, but also the turtles and owls and white tigers, the redwoods, the ozone layer, the icebergs, for the love of God. Every single blessed thing on the face of this earth is holding its breath in this moment. And if you're asking, can I describe that, cousin? Then I've got to say no. No one could describe it. We all just have to live through it, holding each other's hands.
Yeah, it's such a beautiful poem, Alison. That was a Holding Vigil by Alison Luterman. And, the irony of the, how well you described it there, than saying that you couldn't describe it at the end. But even that doesn't really capture the massness that we're all feeling. Even people on the other side of the political aisle feel like this is a life or death election, and everybody's waiting. And, it's a really tense, intense period of time. And we're all in this together, waiting for whatever happens on Tuesday. So thanks for sharing that sentiment and coming on today, Alison.
Thank you so much.
Yeah, thanks. And that was Alison Luterman, today's poet on Rattle, that was Holding Vigil. And you can find Alison if you want to know more about Alison. She was the main guest on Rattlecast number 100. So go back if you didn't watch that episode and check out Alison's book and other work there. And now we, in a rare stroke, have a second Poet Respond poet this week. We don't do that very often anymore, but this week there were too many good poems to pass up. And Matthew King has a sonnet for us that no one's read yet. And so, hey, Matthew, how you doing?
Good. How are you? My internet's a little wonky here, so hopefully I don't suddenly disappear.
Yeah, we've got you. The
It's great
video's
to
a
be
little
here.
bit. Yeah, you might want to actually. Why don't you turn your video off just to make sure we don't lose your audio?
Okay.
Okay.
Sure.
Yeah, there you go. So you're still here on audio, and so tell us about this sonnet that you wrote and how this one came to be.
So this actually refers to a piece of graffiti that was on a construction site in Kingston, Ontario in the early to mid 90s when I was an undergrad student at Queen's University there. And it was one of those construction sites where they've dug a big hole and then it just sits there with plywood around it. And somebody had spray painted on the boards. And this was there for, I don't know, a year, 2, 3 years, I don't know how long. Somebody had spray painted, "What's it all worth without a free and open election?" And which I thought was, I mean, it always amused me that somebody had written this outside this pit, this big empty pit. And anyway, that sort of clanged around in my head ever since. And it found its moment, I guess, in the current election where people are arguing about who's the bigger garbage and dressing up as garbage and pretending to be garbage men. And it raises that question: what's it all worth with a free and open election? Now, I should say I had to tweak the that line from the graffiti to make it scan, so I felt a little bad doing that. But uh, also credit to the anonymous graffiti writer, whoever that was, because this poem wouldn't exist without it.
Yeah, well, why don't you go ahead and
So,
read this, Matthew? No one's read it yet, so we're all anticipating it.
all right. So it's called Election. On plywood walling off a stalled construction site, someone had scrawled, "What's it all worth without an open, free, and fair election?" Behind it, water seeping from the earth sought its equilibrium in the pit, rising, falling, following the weather. We never saw the message fade. Did it require an answer? Was it merely clever? A steel and see-through condo tower stands there now, I guess. I couldn't say which one. To fill the hole and make no such demands on passers-by. The questions day is done. It always made us smile, but now I doubt we knew just what it was we smiled about.
Yeah, that is a great sonnet, great last couplet there, Matthew. And it really, I think, between yours and Alison's poems, I think we captured the entire range of sentiment because there's either this sense of overwhelming dread and fear, like we're waiting, for the results of, a lab test or something, and then also there's this sense of the absurdity of it all, and that the fate of the free world supposedly, and the everything comes down to photo ops at certain places. And I don't know, it's just such a wacky world we live in. And I think that captures that well.
Thanks.
Yeah. Well, thanks so much for being here, Matthew. Always a pleasure.
Thanks for having me on.
Yeah. So is Matthew King. And that's going to be Tuesday's poem of the day on Election Day. It's called Election. So I thought that would be a good one to share then. And of course, open, free, and fair elections are very important to us all. So thanks so much for sharing that, Matthew. Now we're going to take a quick break and go to our main guest, Joseph Millar. So sit tight and we will be right back with more poetry. And we're back. Thanks for your patience. Like I said, today's guest is Joseph Millar. Joe's the author of 6 books of poetry, including Dark Harvest, New and Selected Poems. His latest collection, which is right here, is Shine, published from Carnegie Mellon University Press, just came out. Millar grew up in Pennsylvania and attended Johns Hopkins University before spending 30 years in the San Francisco Bay Area, working at a variety of jobs from telephone repairman to commercial fisherman. So that should be interesting to talk about. He's won fellowships from the Guggenheim Foundation, the National Endowment of Arts, as well as a Pushcart Prize. Millar teaches in Pacific University's low-residency MFA program, which I've said before, I think is the best MFA program in the country, just given, looking at the poets that graduate there and the great poems they're producing. And here he is, Joseph Millar. Hey, Joe, how you doing?
Pretty good. Thanks for having me on.
Yeah, it's great to see you. Great to have you here. Do you want to start out right away with a poem?
Sure enough. Hands. How about I read Hands?
Yeah, that sounds great.
Okay. The secrets of hands, fallen in ruin, knuckles collapsing under pocked skin, tendons aching, the body's rust, though you have certainly not grown thin. Years ago, you liked to come home in the midnight hour, carrying suitcase and beer, and dragging the ghost of your mother aloft in the wings of her hair. And no one remembers the cold that returns like a silent wing over the roof, the cypress and the camellia, where the doves take turns in the darkened leaves under your laundry room window, sitting on their 2 eggs, listening to the rinse and flush empty itself to the dregs. And walking around in your stocking feet, you start acting like someone's mother, watering the spider fern and the pothos, washing the glasses and pan, then turning off all the lights in the kitchen, over the stove, flickering over your hands, the crease in the palm, the hand of fate, the hand of kindness, holding the gate open at least part way, lifeline and the heart line sunk in deeper each day.
Yeah, and I love the casualness of the rhyme in that poem that was Hands by Joseph Millar from his new book, Shine, which, like we said, is just out from Carnegie Mellon. And the book, Joe, is dedicated to Sharon Olds. And so I was wondering if you could tell us a little bit about why that is and how the book came to be.
Okay, I'm happy to. The COVID during COVID, the COVID was very good to my little family. We My partner got a book of poems and a book of essays. I got this book of poems, and we had this little poetry group that met on Mondays, and Sharon was kind of I would say the presiding angel. I'd never been in a workshop with her at any level before, and I was just astounded by her insight and her ability to empathize with the spirit of what somebody was trying to do, and just speak to that, And so what we would do is it was the poetry game, which one made famous by one person, the great Ruth Stone, who used to play this game with people that would come up to Vermont to visit her. Ruth Stone, a national treasure of American poetry, and Sharon was one of those people. But the rules of the game are that everybody brings a couple words or as many as you decide, and then we share those words. And the way we did it was, and then Dorianne would make a phrase. The other people in the group were Matthew Dickman and Major and Dee Dee Jackson, Michael McGriff, and sometimes, rarely, Michael Dickman. So we had, that was also now the ongoing sort of version of Monday Poetry has Tyree Day as well, which is a great addition, of course. So that's how this book happened. Mm-hmm. And the rules of the poetry game, the way I play the poetry game is, if I hear all the words, that's all. I don't have to use any of them. They're in my consciousness. So and we go away for an hour at the most and write and come back and read to each other. And it wasn't very much criticism. It was mostly, this is what I love about the poem, whatever it was, because they're all so new. So these rhymes had started to show up in my work already, but it was like I've written mostly narrative poems in the past, and it's like I've told most of the stories of my life, except these kind of internal stories and momentary stories of the moment, which are like the two marvelous poems that were read earlier about the election. Just these kind of momentary bam, bam. So that's kind of the way these poems were written, and I always thought that they weren't up to anybody else. I thought I was the worst one in the group, pretty much.
Well, I was going to say, it's really interesting to be in a poetry group like that. I mean, with so many amazing poets, yourself included, definitely. But I think we, as us regular poetry fans and lovers, think about our own poetry groups. I mean, you don't think of a group of poets as somebody who has that amazing, cast of characters that are such brilliant poets. And I was going to ask if it might feel intimidating to be
it was totally
surrounded by so many.
It was totally like that, Tim. Totally. I mean, I was like that, and Matthew and Michael, the Dickman twins, and Mike McGriff were also, at their very beginning, students of mine as well as Dorianne's. But here were my kids. They were all writing better than I was, and I think actually probably still are. But particularly in these 1 hour things, I mean, I just thought they were writing these amazing things, and I was writing these little rhymey things, and the rhymes were showing up, and that had never happened to me before, and I didn't have any plan for it. There's no scheme to it. I just started hearing them,
Mm-hmm.
and it was like the language was giving them to me, and so I wrote quite a number of them, and the other people in the group would chide me for being too self-deprecating,
Uh-huh.
and so
Well, that's
so
funny
I
because I've already thought that twice, I think, Joe.
I had to control myself and not wimp it out too bad.
Well, it is
So,
really cool though. Thinking about that group, I always used to think, read about the poetry salons in Paris with like Gertrude Stein, and you think like,
Yeah.
oh, that doesn't happen anymore. But now they're the Zoom salons over COVID, and people are going to be writing about that someday. When Joseph Millar came up with this book Shine, and Dorian came out with her book Life on Earth that we talked about a couple months ago. And it's going to be that thing. I can't believe everybody was getting together on Zoom, and all these poets were sharing their great work together as if, just like everybody else does at a Starbucks or whatever. So that's really fun to hear.
Yeah. Well, it was, and also it was great. It was great fun too. Just seeing everybody every week, and for some reason we were able to be consistent and do it, and the world left that little space open to us. We're having more difficulty now getting everybody on the same page, but we're trying. But yeah, so that's how the rhymes came, and that's how these poems came to be. And at the time, I even have a poem in here which Sharon told me to write, which was about thinking that my writing isn't any good.
Well, do you want to read that one, Joe?
Would you like me to read that one? It's called there's 3 Ars Poeticas in this book.
Uh-huh.
Excuse me. 3 Ars Poeticas.
Which page is it on?
It's on page 54.
Okay.
And this I wrote this because she said, "Why don't you write a poem where you say, no, it's like, say that you don't think you're any good." Ars Poetica 3. Your friends tell you the writing is good, but you're not actually buying it. So much idle conversation, you think, overheard through a hotel window by a cab driver half asleep in the sun, instead of an ode or a psalm, and waiting near the ER for your wife who has just broken her arm, reading a translation of Hafez or Tagore can make you feel godless and small, since you're not Neil Young or Francois Villon. Though on such a day or night as this, you hear the footsteps along the sidewalk, and here comes the old shadow again, like the promise of late season rain, which you hope will keep falling into the earth, its rivers and deserts, its alleys and streets, and the wild wastrel ocean.
Yeah, that was Ars Poetica 3. And as like Joe mentioned, one of 3 Ars Poeticas in the book Shine by Joseph Millar. It just came out. Yeah, so I was thinking about reading these poems. I was thinking a lot about the movement, actually. For some reason that stood out. And I was thinking about how, the best poets who really know what they're doing, you can kind of always tell versus like a regular submission to rattle type poem, because there's so much movement. There's so much like freedom of where you're going to go. And I think maybe the rhyme helps a lot here, where you're being drawn to certain words and phrases, but there's so many leaps and turns in all these poems. Like they always, they move a lot from line to line. There's like we talk about needing to have like a volta in every sonnet or something. There's like a volta in every line almost. You're just shifting and moving and drifting around. And I maybe wonder about the writing process and how, you allow yourself to take leaps like that.
Yeah, that's interesting. Yeah, I know. And this more than any book I've ever written, I've done that because I was just at my wit's end of trying to think of a of a story, and so I could never think of one. So I did one technique that I used on these poems is that I write in a notebook by hand, and it's a notebook where I can take the pages out. It's a little tiny. Well, it's not little tiny. It's probably a regular size composition book, but I can move the pages around. So if I get like, what'll happen to me is I sit down and write for a half an hour or 40 minutes, and I will get, maybe sometimes I'll get a nice little run of description, or a nice little run of language, or or occasional, interesting thought, and it'll be like a piece of a poem, but it isn't a poem. So sometimes I mess around with those because there's a lot of endings that are in those where I have an ending, but I don't have a beginning, or I have a beginning, but I don't have an ending. So I collage my work together a lot. But also, I write about if something happens around, if I hear a car backfire, I'll put that in the poem, a backfire in the street, or was it a firecracker, or was it a gunshot? That just came in from the world. So that's one thing, is trying to stay open to the moment that I'm in. I feel like there's some magic that happens with that. Or if a bird does something, if something happens, I put that in. I'm trying to think of the other thing is just listening to the line that went before. And when it's good, when I'm going good, I'm thinking about shit really fast, and just writing it down. So I have a lot of nonsense, and yeah, I just write it down now, and I didn't used to do that. I didn't used to do that. Maybe I'd do a line of it or something, and then I go, no, get yourself under control. Don't start, but now I pretty much don't do that. So I write down anything.
Yeah, it feels like you've really let yourself go. And I always go back to that on Bukowski's tombstone. It says, don't try. And I think people usually interpret that as some kind of negative, feel about humanity, don't bother. But it doesn't say don't bother. It says don't try. And there's that way that the lack of, focused in attempting to get somewhere lets you go where you need to go, And so it's like giving up that focus and that singular effort that allows yourself the freedom to go surprising places. And I think that's really evident in these poems.
I never knew it said that on Bukowski's tomb.
Well, let's hear another poem, Joe. Let's do Materials next.
Materials, sure. Yeah, materials, yeah. So a lot of this is like, we lived in North Carolina for 10 years. We came back out here in our retirement, and so there's southern stuff in some of these, and this one has materials. There are pieces of silver and pieces of rock. Like there was this book by George Oppen. It was called Materials, and The Materials, I think. And George Oppen is one of these guys who I really admire, but I can't quite figure out what he's talking about all the time, because he's so brilliant and his mind moves so swiftly and in a more abstract way than mine does. But this was kind of what I thought of. It inspired the title, Materials. There are pieces of silver and pieces of rock, wood blades spinning in the ceiling fan. The temperature's high, maybe over 100, where you sleep in the electric TV light with the clicker under your hand. And when I was a boy, I slept in the attic next to my pagan drum, though sometimes I felt like an alien there, rhythmic and speechless, partly ashamed, and I dreamed of a woman with wine-colored hair, swirled back like a mane. Today I know there's no God but God, watching the big woman next door, bending down in her purple robe and putting out food for the cats. For she must have been in love before, standing outside in the shadows alone, listening to gulls cry out in the wind, which goes wherever it wants to go and may not return again.
Yeah, that's one. I love that leap at the end. That's a great example of what I was just talking about. First moving to the woman next door in the first place, but then that leap at the very end to the wind too, which goes wherever it wants to go and may not return again. Talking so much about life in general. That's materials from Shine by Joseph Millar. Then we hear the rhymes too. As you're listening to poems this whole episode, you're going to hear a lot of rhymes moving through in a very free way, and that's what these poems feel like. Joe, I was really interested in your background. Spending 30 years doing a whole bunch of different things, including fisherman and all sorts of things. What can you tell us about that journey through poetry, and why you spent so much time doing so many different things?
Well, when I got this degree, when I was a kid. When I was 25, I got this MA. It was an MA in creative writing from Hopkins, and it was a 1-year deal. And 69 and 70s, from fall 69 through spring of 70. And it was, so I had this, the year was the spring of 1970. The war was raging in Vietnam. And that spring was the spring they invaded Cambodia, and they shot those kids at Kent State. A bunch of us went down to Washington, D.C. We heard Abby Hoffman talking before they, but while they were out on bail. And we heard Ginsberg. Ginsberg came on the demonstration when they invaded Cambodia. He came out and did chanted into the thing. But that night, D.C. was like, couple police cars got lit on fire. It was all the throngs in the streets, and I was like, I didn't want to go into the academy. I didn't want to take my degree and go get a job, try to go get a job in a school. Mm-hmm. I graduated from undergraduate school in '67, so this was I've been out here already. And I went back to Baltimore for that school year to get that degree. And I thought when I went there that, well, maybe I would like to get a job teaching. And then while I was there, I just thought, no. Yeah, I mean, the way it was with poets were reading against the war. James Wright and David Ray, and William Stafford, Bly, Adrian Rich, Levertop, they were giving these readings against the war, protest readings. Dylan had that song about, the National Bank sells road maps to the soul in the old folks' home in the college, and the friends I had were all like, "You're not going to go do that, are you?" And but I was like, "No, I'm not." So what followed was, that was 1970. I came back out to San Francisco, and I went to work, I think, in a coffee house for a long time in North Beach. And then I got a job driving a cab. And then I went up to Alaska during the pipeline and worked as a surveyor up there on the North Slope. And then that's how I got into the fishing. I met people in the fishing industry up there. And I would work a bunch of months, and then I'd be the end of the season, and then I'd get unemployment, and I'd try to write poems. And I was writing these kind of poems that were, I was trying to kind of like just write these purely imagistic poems where there was no story or anything, or my idea was to be perfectly clear so a person could see, like Asian or something, a person could see the landscape and the ego of the. So basically, they were these lightweight little wispy things I was doing, but and I wasn't in the game at all.
Mm-hmm.
And then I got married, and the woman had a couple kids, and she said, "Well, you got to stay home now if you're gonna if you want, we're gonna be together." Because so I got a job in the telephone business as an installer. I learned, I just went there and hired out, and they were hiring, and I ended up doing that for 15 years, and I worked my way up the line in that work till I was a foreman, and then. But toward the end of that, I started taking the last 3 years or so of that period of time. I started taking classes on Wednesday night in this little bookstore from the rookie poet Dorianne Locke, who had her first book had come out, and the second book was coming out, and you could get 6 Wednesday nights for $75. So I would go over there with right from work, with the truck from work, and I'd turn my pager off and sit in the workshop for 3 hours, and that's where I learned about how to write narrative and how to talk about things that were really happening in my life. Because she would say to me, "You've had all this outrageous stuff happen to you. How come there's no poems about any of this work or how stuff that's happened to you?" Mm-hmm. It's a long answer, but and then from then on, I reignited because I was always reading. Mm-hmm. I mean, the whole time I was working in the phone business, I was supposed to be going home at night reading these switch manuals and and I was going home and reading Neruda, or going home and reading APR, or I was always reading whatever was going on. But that's how I started to actually find what they call my voice. And my first book, Overtime, came out. I was 56 years old. It came out in 2001 on 9/11, and so it had a bunch of work poems, and I think I always have. I'm always connected to the physical world, I think, through those years of doing that. In a way, I have a strong connection to the physical world.
Yeah. I always think about that because, for me too, I wouldn't be here, if I was pursuing academia, I wouldn't have gone into poetry at all. It was just, I got this job that seemed different, from that, where I get to do a whole bunch of different things. But the time that I loved poetry really the most was when I was working, in a group home and landscaping, stuff, where I was doing other stuff all day, and then you'd come home, and then it was like poetry was this like refuge that was like your true secret self, like your true calling behind everything else. And there was sort of this magic to having that special place to go back to, and also, just this sense of like that was the real thing, and it felt so precious, and I love that aspect of it. And then when you end up in it full time and doing it all the time, you lose that somewhat. So I kind of maybe romanticize those years where I was doing other things. And I was wondering if you did the same thing. Did you feel like that was your calling the whole time, and it was really precious to you? And how did that transition feel to your experience of what it means to be, somebody who lives with poetry?
Well, once I started getting these work poems, the poems that were in my first book, which sort of got me into the game. Once I started getting those poems, I wanted to be writing all the time. My wife had moved out on me and left me with our son, who was 8 years old. And so I was a single father. There's some single father poems in that first book. But once I started writing about my life, and it was starting to work, right? And I knew it was working. I knew this is the shit, I knew it. And I do it at work. So I was a foreman by then. So I would tell my guys, "So you guys are there, and you guys go over here. I'll be in the truck. If you need anything, I'd be in the truck. I'd be writing in there." And if they came over, I would quick cover it up with a newspaper, with a sports page. I'd cover it up so they wouldn't catch me. And it was like a secret though. It's like you say, it was a secret identity. And and it was it's still very precious to me. But I know what you mean because once I got to actually stop that kind of work, which happened, uh, I don't know, in 1997, in the May of 1997. By that time, I'd been going out with Dorian for, we had a 3 year long distance relationship where she'd get these she was at the University of Oregon and she would come down and stay with me and my son. And we talk on the phone all the time, and I'd see her. We were going together. We had a couple breakups, but we kept getting back together. And then she said, "You should just come up here. You got this master's degree. I know you're going to have a book pretty soon. You can get a job teaching it up here in a community college. You're not going to ever do that in the Bay Area probably because you don't have it. You don't have a book. You don't. You know."
Mm-hmm.
And anyway, I said, "Cool, I'll do it." So I went up there in May. And then I'm up in a university environment, and then there's poetry everywhere. And then I did get a job at a community college up north at Mount Hood Community, my first teaching job. And then but it was still, Tim, I was still pinching myself though. I mean, I still have moments where I'm pinching myself, especially in this low residency teaching work, because the students in there are grown ups. They've had lives. I mean, they're not kids that are, just trying to get credits. They want to tell their story. They want to learn how to do it. And it's an experience that has a lot of electricity in it and a lot of feeling in it. So when I first started to be able to do this, and I'm telling you, I'm up in front of these classrooms of kind of intro poetry students, advanced poetry students. After a year at Mount Hood, I think I'd been there a year. I got a job at Oregon State, which was much closer to home in Eugene, and I had undergraduates in the class with me. Knucklehead poetry, I called it. But I loved those kids. I loved them. I mean, some of them were in there just to get the credit and whatnot, but some of them were in there. They wanted to write their little poems, and I was going like, I can't believe I'm getting paid for this, and I still feel like that. I still feel like somebody gives you some poems to read. And you're like, oh, here's a manuscript to read, right? Or here's a sheaf of poems to read. Ho hum. But it's also, there's a little part where you first started reading them where you're going like, this could be pretty good.
Mm-hmm.
Or you open it up or you go, well, that's some pretty good beginning. Or you go, there's some good lines in there. I don't know. You kind of start prickling up and getting awake. I know you know this because you're a fine editor. You have this feelings like that. So I'm still pinching myself, but that was all of a sudden I'm not doing 8 to 5 anymore. All of a sudden I'm not working with my body anymore. No more pulling cable in the rain. No more, it was just, I just got my little books of poems here and books of poetry, and that's where I'm going to talk about that. And then they're going to give me a paycheck.
Yeah, well, definitely. It sounds wonderful. And I relate to that gratitude for being it. It's the same thing with submissions, like you said. Even when poems aren't good poems, it's poems. There's still such fascinating stories people have sometimes. Even the cover letter sometimes can be amazing. And you're just like blown away with the lives and thoughts people have. And to get that on a personal level, too, with students is really cool.
And it's poetry. It's poetry. It's the top shelf of language. It's the best you can get. I mean, I'm sorry to all the novelists and playwrights and shit, but poetry is a top shelf because quite often, like Alison was saying, quite often you're trying to find words for something that there's no words for. So when there's something that needs words that there's no words for, they come to us. They don't give us any money. They're like, no, no, you're not getting paid. I mean, accepted in some sort of ancillary manner, but it's the best you can get. So it's no surprise that we feel gratified to, get to engage with it. Other people show you their stuff. That's a piece of their heart, so yeah, yeah.
Yeah, well, definitely. I completely agree and know where you're coming from. Let's hear another poem, though. We want to make sure we get to a good number. Let's do wildfire season next. You talked about a lot about being in Northern California and Oregon, and that's a big part of life there.
Yeah, wildfire season. You know what page that's on?
33.
33, thank you. Wildfire season. We had it so bad up here during this one period of time, one day in particular, it was really darkness at noon. I mean, the sun looked like a little faded. It looked like it was like 6 in the morning, and you could barely see only the sun was way high in the sky. Wildfire season. She wants you to follow the tracks to the sea and stop thinking about tomorrow. The tracks of the ravens, herons, and crows that scar up the landscape and keep pressing down. And though you don't wish to go through this again, she wants you to rise up into the air with its smoke and particles falling like rain, ashes of trees and houses and cars, burned up vineyards, burned up guitars, even the ashes of someone's mother, shaped like a little French wing, an aileron hovering above California, where the trains roll south and the crossing bells ring. For these are the days to be patient and try not to want anything. And these are the nights you can't see the stars, to drink extra water and climb the stairs slowly and practice your quietest breathing.
And that was Wildfire Season from Joseph Millar's new book, Shine. Joe, you mentioned that transition into more narrative poetry is the spark that really ignited poetry for you. And I was wondering if you could talk more about that in more detail. Like, why was it that writing about your own story mattered so much, and how did you come to realize that that's what you should be doing and not writing the sort of imagist type poems that you were writing before?
Well, everybody that I liked, the people I was reading that I thought were really cool, and specifically Philip Levine, Sharon Olds, Galway Connell. I liked those writers, and they were doing stuff that I thought was really cool. And James Wright was someone who had a profound impact on me, because I just thought those people they had so much feeling, and there was so much feeling in their writing, and this stuff I was doing wasn't like that. But from those little workshops in the bookstore, in Oliver's Books, those little workshops in there, that was where I got educated, kind of. I sat there with mostly, in the little workshop, it was mostly older women and me, right after work, and we read the poems together, and we were counseled to say something real, and not beat around the bush. And then, so I did start writing. I remember I wrote a poem about wanting a new truck and all the things it would have. It would have these wing mirrors, it would have this and that, and then I'd ride by the people, wave to the people in suits, and it was like I started to get loose with actually the stories of my life, and the vicissitudes of single fatherhood. What a pain in the ass it was to be raising a 9-year-old, an 8-year-old, 9-year-old, 10-year-old, and also how much I loved him, at the same time, and tell the truth about that. Oh, I know. I remember one time that when in the workshop, somebody said, to Dorian, I'd like to. We should have a book of women's secrets. And she said, I'm not really that interested in that. I like to see a book of men's secrets. And I wrote this poem called Hansel and Gretel's Father, which was about, that myth of Hansel and Gretel, where the parents, the kids hear them talking about they're going to take them down in the woods and lose them. And I wrote this poem called Hansel and Gretel's Father, and she said, "Okay, that's you did it with that poem. That was a touchstone poem for me." I might have it here. If I have it here, would you like to hear it?
Yeah, I'm sure everybody would love to. Yeah.
This is another fine book. It's called Dark Harvest. It came out in 21. Yeah, it's in here. Mike McGriff helped me put this book together because I couldn't figure it out. Hansel and Gretel's Father. So this is like an early narrative type poem. On days when the small boy, now asleep, asks me for money and movie tickets, I can't see any escape. I want to banish playgrounds, the circus, and all bright colors, and I don't want to hear anyone laugh. If I don't get this electric bill paid, something bad will happen. Bottle caps, water guns, and X-Men cards are scattered all over the homemade fort in the garage. A Fred Flintstone mask hangs from my truck antenna, and it's almost time for me to go to work. I'm yelling at him in front of his wide-eyed friends, and he sobs, sitting on his bicycle with his hat on backwards. He may never understand this fierce satisfaction, watching him eat vegetables at supper, as though the green stalk fibers and the juice were entering my own body. Have some more, I mutter, the shadow behind me pressing me down into my own dark footprints. I don't think the woodcutter wanted gold, or even the manic afternoon sex his witch of a wife might have promised if he would only get rid of the kids. Probably he just wanted to make enough to feed everybody.
Yeah, that's a great poem, Joe. And I think that shows the sense of movement, too, that you see more condensed in the newer poems, too. So I pulled it up, but it took too long. I think I got a preview, but it's too long. Anyway, that was a wonderful poem, and you could see. So that was a touchstone poem for you. Do you remember the feeling after writing it?
Yeah, I remember. Yeah, I do.
Like, did you know when you finished that poem that it was something different and special?
Yeah, I did.
Yeah.
And someone clicked. I went, "That's it. That's how it is. That's all the bad stuff I did. I told on myself for being, such a so terrible to him, and then I knew it was the real deal, and then I had a touchstone, and so that the rest of the poems in Overtime, mostly, they were poems that had a level of feeling that I hadn't put in my work before then, and I was writing them from the time I was, I don't know, I want to say 48, 47, 48, 49, 50. The book came out when I was 56.
Yeah. Well, that somebody mentioned how cathartic writing that poem must have been, and I always think about too the way cathartic, isn't like a release like we think about it. It's actually a cleansing. It's like a cleaning out that we do of ourself. And when you clean yourself, you end up feeling better, but you get all that stuff out too. And so that's one of the things that makes poetry just a wonderful thing to be pursuing. And when you find it, then you know it.
Yeah. Yeah, it's true. But something about being able to say how it really was, is it's a satisfying thing. It's why we do it. It's like a bird singing, it's why we do it. I mean, we just do it because it's like this this is a lyric impulse, and it's also the truth teller impulse.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah, definitely. I think that's why we love poetry. Well, I should say at this point, if anybody has any questions for Joe, leave them in the chat windows, either on Facebook or YouTube, and I'll ask a few questions. Helps if you do all caps so I can see it. Also, if you haven't clicked the like button yet, that really helps too. We always have like twice as many people watching live as have clicked like yet, and if I say that helps out the algorithm show this interview and poems to more people. So do click the like button if you haven't yet. Let's do another poem, Joe, from the book. Do you want to do? Let's do the title poem, "Shine," next. We haven't done that yet.
Okay. Yeah, and there it is. Okay, shine. This is actually true. I mean, this phenomenon that's described in the poem is true. So I liked it because it means more light. Shine. The fire burns down against the rocks, turning the ashes white, and the petals of the Christmas flower open their points out like a new star, which the world is making every moment, making new stars day and night. In the pale grass and the brown straw fallen under the cypress and pines, new stars being made, so common and rare, burning away in the desert air, where sometimes the wind makes a sound like a flute, and only the wild things set foot. They shine on the ice fields in the far north, and all through heaven and earth. There are piles of dark kelp washed up in the sand, washed in the fullness of time, and the moon's a bright crescent just past new, hanging above the waves, which are making new stars in their spindrift and white caps, and making new stars in their depth, new stars in the abysses and canyons, shining on life and death.
That was the title poem, "Shine," from Joseph Millar's new book. And I always wonder, why did you pick that poem in particular as a title poem, Joe?
Well, the rest of my titles, the rest of my titles were like, I just thought it was kind of you know what I was gonna, did you ever hear of this thing called clang speech?
No, I
Clang
haven't.
speech it's a form of mental, it's kind of like Tourette's. It's where you can't help rhyming. It's a kind of speech where, if you say good morning to somebody that has this, will go, good day to you. You look kind of fade. It's a regular day. It's gray, gray, gray. They rhyme on them. So I had I was going to call this book Clang because of the rhymes. And my editor said at the time, Jerry Costanzo, who no longer has this press, I'm sorry to say. And but anyway, he said, this is not the best title. He said, it has an intro page that says clang. It gives a definition of clang, and it gives, what is it? Clang, to give out a loud resonant sound as that produced by a large bell or two heavy pieces of metal striking together. But it wasn't, the rhymes aren't clangy enough to really justify doing that. That's almost like Dr. Seuss type rhyming. And he convinced me not to do it. And then as I looked at all the titles of the poems that I had chosen out of the ones I'd written, all those, Shine just seemed cool.
Well, it definitely is. And sort of that sense of freedom through rhyming is sort of puts a shine on things. So I think it's a really neat title to use for the book. Yeah. Well, I want to make sure we do a lot of poems. Let's do another one. Why don't you pick one? What do you want to read next that we haven't yet, Joe?
So I got this poem called Swan Song that's got like some Shakespeare in it, and also has one of Sharon's great words from the word list, which was chevelure, which is hair, so I wrote this poem, Swan Song, and it was Annie broke her shoulder, And when she did, that was something about that in the poem, but like waiting for your wife outside the ER. She actually did break her shoulder. So she was going around with her, she couldn't move her arm. And I wrote this one, Swan Song. You are like a swan with a broken wing, Ophelia gliding through mansions of water, smelling the hesitant perfumes of night, fig and skunk cabbage, railroad flowers, shells washed up in the campfire light. We think of her down there under the current, who my friend says is a Christ figure, weighed down by betrayal and grief, and her long clothes, and her chevelure, whose mother we never meet, and listening to jazz in Sam's Park Place barbershop, where I've paid for the first shave of my life, lying back at age 78, coconut oil and my face in a hot towel, only my nose sticking out, like a gangster boss in a film noir, the low-down blues stalking around, Jimmy Smith and Stanley Turrentine. Alas, poor Cannonball, I knew him well, who winked at me climbing onto the stage in Baltimore's famous ballroom, winter of 1969. Another lord gone in the dark soil of history, or maybe it's really an ocean. Another lord surging into the tide on the long wave of resurrection.
Yeah, and that was Swan Song from Joseph Millar's new book, Shine. You mentioned that clang speech, Joe, and that as opposed to shine, it might be an interesting distinction. Because I think a lot of times we start to rhyme in a poem and we get really sing-songy really quick. Your brain loves rhyme, and so they end up being really close and too much, like very quickly. But none of these poems ever do that, of course. And so is there something you have to rein back as you're letting rhymes draw you forward at the same time so you don't make it too intense?
Yeah. And also you can put them in the middle of the line instead of out at the end. There's ways to disguise them so they're kind of doing their deal, but they're not as obvious because the rhythm of the lines, the meter or whatever you want to call it, rhythm basically, isn't set up to emphasize them. They're just in there. Yeah, and then it has also I got a certain kind of rhythm going in this book too that came about. I don't know how. I just stopped work. I did. I just stopped working on. Bukowski told me don't try. The most I remember from Bukowski is I would read those notes of a dirty old man, or the ones that were all those little entries, and he always had advice on how to play the horses, and some of it to this very day I remember, which is if you see a horse that in the morning line he's like 15-1, and you go to the track and you look on the thing and he's down at 4-1 or something. That's because somebody knows something. Bet that horse underlay, he called it. But I didn't know. But it's stopping trying, sort of stopping trying and keeping my ears open. And then, like you got to be able to look at it and go, you can't keep doing this. It's ridiculous. Although I have one that kind of does that. Would you like to hear December 21st, which is the solstice, winter solstice?
Yeah, sure. What page is that on?
That's on page 53.
Okay.
This year, an old guy named Lewis has driven me. So December 21st, winter solstice is called December 21st. That's all. This year, an old guy named Lewis has driven me to the market in his ancient blue half-ton Ford, which goes by the name of Anthony and has a hole in the floor. And we've loaded up with a Christmas ham and spinach and 12 ruby skin yams, pumpkin filling in an oversized can, cinnamon sticks from Vietnam, and one copy of USA Today, useless except for the crossword. For today is the winter solstice, winter to half the earth, shortest day, longest night here in the quiet north, under the moon and Venus above, Saturn conjunct with Jupiter, where no one needs to anxiously hope or endlessly seek for love, though we can write down a solstice wish and throw it into the fire and peel an orange in the darkness.
Yeah, that was December 21st from Shine. Yeah, thanks for sharing that, Joe. We got a lot of great questions from the audience. Mark Grenier says, I see a lot of Christian images and ideas in these poems. To what degree is religion important to your poems? That's an interesting question.
Well, I don't know about religion exactly, but the spirit, I think the spirit of life goes through everything. And I'm glad if it shows up in these poems, and the spirit of love, of life, so that it's most important to me. It's it's the most important thing, actually.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. To me, I mean, I often say that poetry is a kind of prayer. I mean, for me, like I'm not a religious person, but that's as close as I come. And it's sort of producing something that's like a prayer to the universe or something like that. I don't know what it is, but you're doing that every time you write a poem, I think.
Yeah, me too.
And Tamara Kreutz wants to know, she says, in what ways has Dorian rubbed off on you, poetically speaking, and in what ways have you rubbed off on her? So that's an interesting question.
Well, she had more of effect on me than I had on her, I think, by pretty much by far. She was like, I learned how to write in lines in graduate school at Hopkins, basically. But that's, was about it. Everything else that went into the presence of imagery and how to bring it into my poems and use it as how important it was. I mean, Ezra Pound says poetry's language highly charged with meaning. And the way we charge it with meaning is we use imagery and we use sound and we use thought content that is compelling, we hope. But a lot of that I learned that from her. A lot of this, most everything really, I learned from her. And she would, more than anything, just tell me, like when that Hansel and Gretel's father poem came, she took that one home with her. She never taken anything once home before. She has a great Geiger counter for where it's going on in a piece of writing. And I've learned to have one too from studying with her. And I don't know how I've rubbed off on her. That I don't know in what ways, but I'm sure in some ways, I probably have. But
yeah, well, that brings up something. As a sort of powerhouse poetry couple, there's I can imagine being immersed in poetry constantly, but I can also imagine not being the case. So how often, like how much is poetry a part of your day-to-day life with Dorian? Is that something that you're always engaged with? Do you like say, throughout the day, hey, look at this poem or whatever? Or is it something that's like isolated and in the rest of your life is separate from that?
Well, it's always a neutral ground. It's a sacred ground to both of us. So we could be having a fight about something and be really pissed off at each other. And if one person breaks the silence to say, I saw something in the APR the other, or some just some idle, it's accepted as that. That's something you don't say. You don't get snarky about that. You don't right. That's intended as an olive branch, and we've pretty much always stayed to that. At the beginning, we were like talking about poetry all the time. I mean, I was especially, but she as well. And we would sit in the car. We'd go when we were out doing stuff. We'd stop somewhere, like near the ocean or something, in the front seat of the car or the truck, and either give each other words or not, and write for 45 minutes and then read them to each other. Well, we don't do that anymore. But that was a lot of books ago.
Mm-hmm.
And so it's, I think, understandable about that. It's pretty much like, yeah, we're like, I wouldn't call us, I think we're a poetry family, but she's the, she's the one everybody knows about. And so I still follow along. I feel like I follow along in her wake to a certain degree, but I write my own way, which is not her way.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, I go wander around, screw around with rhyme and do stuff because I don't know, for the hell of it, and more I think than she does.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Well, Carla Schwartz in the chat reminds us that Dorianne, when she was on a couple months ago, said that you were the one who put her new collection together. Like, she had a whole bunch of poems, and she just threw them at you and said, "Hey, which one of these are a book, Joe?"
Oh yeah, because I've learned to be a good editor. I mean, I mean, I have learned to be an editor. I did all of her books since I've been with her. She's run them by me, and a couple of them, the Book of Men, she didn't even know she had a book there. And I figured that out in one morning. That was what it was about, and should be the title of it. And she did it, and it's a good book. And the new and select, that's the one I'm the proudest of. That Only As the Day Is Long. That's the Pulitzer finalist. That's a great book of poems. And the new one. But the new one, I didn't have as much input on. I had some, but not as much. She mainly did that one. That was one during the COVID. We did our own books and showed them to each other at the end after they were together. I think maybe we suggested some order changes or such, but it wasn't much. Mm-hmm. So that's it's changed over the years, I would say.
Yeah. Well, that's really interesting to hear, like, behind the scenes, how things work, because we can only imagine from the outside. We're up on time, Joe. Let's do one more poem. What do you want to finish out with?
Oh, well, I don't know. What do you have any requests, Tim?
I don't know.
How about immersive? Immersive. Do you like immersive? That's a good one. That's the last poem in the book.
Yeah, sure. Let's do that. That's always a good way to end. Yeah.
It's was about the Van Gogh exhibit. I meant to be talking of the huge cargo ship jammed in the throat of the Suez Canal, which the full moon's tide lifted free this morning, and also the spring's rare butterflies jagging along the back fence, and my neighbor's accordion music seething under the door, and the ways I can't pay attention for long, and the value of common sense. I meant to be talking of Vincent van Gogh and the chipped light of wheat fields he carried inside him, breaking apart in the noonday sun, the black wings of crows and the wreckage of shadows, an old wagon on fire in the ditch, or the eaves of a barn, its haymow broken in half by time and the rain falling on San Francisco, and the blue pigeon standing alone under the tiny awning where my love and I also stood, watching it come down like mercy, like threads from some astral wardrobe across from the old Fillmore West, drinking takeout coffee from the little kitchen and waiting for the movie to start.
Yeah, the great ending to the book, the great poem to end on, too. That was immersive. The last poem, In Shine, by Joseph Millar. Joseph, thanks so much for being a guest and sharing your stories and chatting today. It's been so much fun and really enjoyed hearing the poems from the book, too.
Tim, thank you, brother.
Yeah, definitely. My pleasure. Yeah, take care. And that was Joseph Millar. You can find all of Joseph's work at Joseph Millar. That's Joseph, Millar, josephmillar.org. So we're going to take a quick break and go to actually, I forgot to say at the beginning of the show that this is the special episode where we have our Prompt Poet of the Month announcement. So the best prompt poem from October. Yeah, from October will be announced. It's a familiar face once again, so we'll see who that is. And we also have our prompts for this week. And the prompt for this week was to write a poem in... Wait, no, that's not right. 1 second. I did not update this. The prompt for this week was to... Hang on. Was to... Right there. Pick a photographic portrait featuring someone you know personally. Or someone you don't know personally. Sorry, I'm butchering this. Pick a photographic portrait featuring someone you don't know personally and write a short poem that explores their story. So that's your prompt for this week. It's a 1-page max if you want to share a poem. Of course, if you're going to submit poems later, they can be any length you want, but we have to have a time limit here. 1-page max. Email your poem first. If you got one, to promptlines@rattle.com. That's promptlines, all one word, @rattle.com, so we can show it on the screen. And then find the Zoom link, which I'm about to deploy. The Zoom link, I'll be in both Facebook and YouTube, so if you find that, join, but only if you want to share a poem. If you'd like to enjoy the other poems, just sit back right where you are, because it's the best way to view it. You get to see the poems too on YouTube. You don't on the Zoom, so just stay on YouTube or Facebook if you want to listen to the poems. But if you have one, share it on the Zoom, and we'll be right back with more poetry. And we're back. We have our prompt poems editor, our associate editor of Rattle now. Katie got a promotion at the board meeting this week. Congratulations, Katie. How you doing, associate editor?
Thank you. This associate editor is reporting that she is well.
Very good. Yeah, so Katie's been working hard for Rattle for a long time, and we decided to make her an associate editor. So I don't know. We haven't talked about whether or not to call you the prompt series editor still. I think that, because people have to understand that you're the ones picking the poems. That's very important. But
I wear many hats,
You definitely do.
I'm going to have more editor roles than you eventually.
Well, that'd be nice. I'd take a step back and write more poems. That'd be fun.
That would be good for everyone.
So let's see. So we have our prompt poet of the month announcement today. And do you want to let everybody know who that is?
I am thrilled to announce that the winning prompt poem of the month was written by our own Hemet Malak. Yay!
Yeah. Hey, Hemet, congratulations.
Thank you so much. I'm just terrified.
Well, definitely don't be that. I mean, this is a poem you read, of course, during the Villanelle prompt a couple weeks ago. So tell us again how the poem came to be.
I can't remember. I can't remember anything. I feel like my teacher just told me to come and read in the staff room or something. I can't remember. I think Katie's prompt was I was loving form, and I still love form, and a villanelle was really something that I felt this theme for me was really apt. And I don't know, it just sort of I really love rhyme and I love repetition, so it's a bit natural for me. But yeah, that's what it is.
Yeah, well, Katie, I know we talked off camera before about how Hemet is one of those poets that's just getting better and better at a rapid pace. So it was sort of inevitable that it would be one of them. But
yeah.
why'd you pick this poem?
Well, so the specific prompt too was to vary the refrain a lot in the villanelle and cheekily have to admit that's because the villanelles I tend to like the most are the ones that really play with the variations of the repeated lines. And I loved, the shift as we're going to see. I guess, some people are going to remember that you read this poem, so maybe I can say where you go with arsonist and shifting it is really nice. The rhymes are really nice, and the way that you formatted the poem too really fits and is something that imbues the sense of what's going on in the poem even more. And it's beautiful to listen to you read it because we've already gotten to, so I can say that with confidence. And then a really nice villanelle. And so I have to confess, when you read it on the prompt lines, I was thinking, oh, this could be it. And here we are now. So congratulations.
Thank you. Thank you so much. Can I just say thank you publicly, because really, I'm a poet because of you guys, your generosity and everything you produce. And I've just learnt so much in the few months that I've absorbed everything you do. I finished all the critiques of the week and the sessions today with the poets and the poetry space. I've just learnt so much. So I'm very, very, very grateful for you.
Oh, thanks.
Aw.
Yeah, it's definitely.
Well, that's wonderful.
Yeah, it's so rewarding to see stuff work. So, why don't you go ahead and read this poem again, Hemet?
Okay, thank you. Smoking ceremony. You call me arsonist, mad firefly. Our photos curl and crackle in the sink. Those years together burn, smoke thick with sighs. I watch the tendrils dance to cleanse the sky, which colours now in hues of rose and pink. Call me artist, my madness paints goodbye, in letters on this canvas nearly dry. Make no mistake, this is forever ink. The years are burned, the smoke has choked our sighs. The letter starburst into butterflies, and here's a toast to which we both can drink. From arson's match, we made 2 fireflies, these children smelted from our mouths and eyes. Our love left bubbles as we watched it sink, but years have burst into 1,000 sighs. There's comfort as the seasons prophesize, the vow of fall to bloom again in spring. No arsonist, that madness burnt me dry, this smoke of years in flames to bless our sighs.
Yeah, and that was Hemet Malak with a smoking ceremony, which can be the prompt poem or the poem of the day on Thursday. So we have a lot of stuff coming up with, Tuesday we have another Poets Respond poem, and then we have to wait until the opening, and the opening is Thursday. So that'll be the prompt poem of the month will be the poem of the day on Thursday. Yeah, thanks so much, Hemet, for sharing that. And we'll see you in a bit for probably another poem too. So we're looking forward to that.
Yeah, you've got to do the double. You've got to take advantage of it.
Thank you so much again.
Yeah,
Thank
thanks,
you.
Hemet. Yeah, so that was Hemet Malak once again. And now let's move to our prompts for this week. And it was a fun prompt to do, Katie, I'd say. And so where did you take this?
Well, I took this, first of all, I know that sometimes people say they cheated on the prompt. I definitely cheated on the prompt because you'll see I address it within the span of the hyphen, but I'll show you guys the picture first.
Oh, wait a minute. Yeah, I didn't realize that. It's supposed to be something you don't know.
I addressed it in the poem, though.
That's true. But yeah, I read this poem, but I forgot that you cheated.
Also, I forgot for a second that I wasn't going to be able to use your .cam.
Oh.
So this is on my computer. So, okay. So my dad, this is like a show and tell situation now. My dad is a photographer. He was a photojournalist, and
a brilliant photographer too.
Yeah,
He's
really
great.
brilliant.
Yeah, he really is.
So he has all these books. And so that's Andy Warhol on the front. It's a photo my dad took at New York Fashion Week once. And then this is me and my sister. And so this is this is the photo, but it is cheating a bit. I admit it, but I address it in the poem. Okay.
Yeah. Okay.
And it's a hyphen for anybody just listening, so it doesn't sound weird when I read the monoku. Although monokus kind of always sound weird, but just part of why we love them. So, okay. Dark room. Maybe it's unfair to say that I don't know her, but through the lens of black and white, everything becomes a question. The new light undershirt, the cardboard inside somersaulting out onto the checkerboard linoleum. Dad woke us up early to capture the startled look in my eyes. I can still feel the heat of the blow dryer with its glowing coils. Would that little girl know me or wish I'd snapped a different life? Either way, in his portrait, I was still alive. Negatives scattered on the cutting room floor.
Yeah, I love that. I love especially the haiku. I mean, that's such a, using negatives that way is really neat. And I can see this poem going to be in Frog Pond pretty soon.
Oh, thanks. This was one that I felt I really liked when you and Joseph Millar were talking about when you write some that click, that feel like you understand something different, and I got that sense a little bit with this poem, which is nice. So
yeah.
Now it's kind of fun because I have no idea what picture you picked because we're in separate states right now.
Yeah, well, I was going to write the poem on the plane, and then I totally forgot that the prompt was
Story
to
of
do a
your
photograph. So I had it was a photograph of a stranger. So I went through the camera roll on my phone trying to find any picture of somebody I didn't know. And of course, all the pictures are like you or the kids or whatever. And when do you take a photo of strangers? Not really. So I found there were three. There was there was a picture of Lizzie at a carousel, and there were a bunch of people. So I thought maybe that. Then I kept going. Then I found this really interesting curator in an art gallery that I took the kids to once, and she was a really fascinating person. Almost did that. Then the third, there were only three options. The third was the one I chose because it was an interesting photo. It was the most interesting photo of the bunch. And so I'll reveal that photo at the end. But this is the poem. And it's right here. Let me switch this. It was a portrait of a teenage tour guide at the Winchester Mystery House. It was an accident that you're here, but here you are at the edge of the frame in a single snapshot stored in the depths of my old phone's photo app. Ghost of a girl, you haunt those halls of ones and zeros, as mysterious to me as the magic of hearing now, too, your voice, a marvelous monotone, so pure in the blur of your boredom, so dull with dispassion that it made a kind of music, a song without beat or melody as you muddled through lines you memorized like the 44 steps of awkward staircase in the West Wing, stride after stride, each riser only inches high as we spiraled in a line you led, trying not to trip, your oversized hydro flask held in front of you like a lantern never lit, past the doors to nowhere, past the sideways chandelier, the spiderweb glass, the moldings, the stencils, the finishes, the details as unending as the work that could never not work, your voice as stiff as the switch you pretended to flick, the first intercom east of the Mississippi, and we awed at that, as if it were worth the admission, as if we, in your side-eyed glance, weren't glancing at ourselves, a whole afternoon of our work, and nothing better to do. That is the poem, and here's the photo. And so I was trying to take a photo of this lamp, and there the tour guide is in the side. And if you're watching on the Zoom, you can't see it, of course, or listening afterward. But that is the photo that I used.
Well, that was interesting, and I have to say, I thought where you were going with that, though, is that so you went up and took a random picture of a person on the airplane, because I would have totally dared you. Like, if we'd both been on the flight and realized we didn't have a picture.
That would have been a good idea. I should have thought of that, but I did not.
No, that was great.
All right. Well, thanks so much, Katie, for sharing that. And I know, the girls are downstairs. You got to get back to them. So you're going to be popping in and out, listening. But
yeah, I'll pull it up on YouTube if I leave here too. Okay.
Yeah.
Thank you.
All right. Thanks. Yeah. So there's our prompt poems editor. No, our associate editor, Katie Dozier, with our prompt poems. Now let's see what everybody else has. And let's go straight back to Hemet. Why not? Let's see what Hemet had this week.
Good, then I can breathe soon. Me too.
Yeah. So where did you take this prompt?
Okay. Yes, I found a picture which I really loved. Well, actually, I found a different picture. I wrote one that I didn't like at all, and then I've written this one. It was very hard, though, to write about someone you don't know, because usually my poetry is really personal. Mm-hmm. So it's a real challenge.
Yeah, I think that's what made it a fun challenge, too. It's definitely a poem I wouldn't have written otherwise, so there's something to that.
Okay, this is fruit, fresh from the oven. Here, my love, have this fruit I picked for you. Sit, eat it now, don't take it home to keep. It's sweetest from the hand by which it grew. These hands, I know they've changed, but still they speak. For every etching life rubbed on my skin, they thank the artist when I wake from sleep. I took my mamma's jewels out from the tin of ghee she kept them in, safe from papa, and when the air was full of whiskey, then she'd twirl and glimmer like a movie star. And her yellow apron would balloon way out in the shape of hourglass biscuit jar. We were filled with shortbread, pastries, soufflés. Mamma gave us all the sugar she craved, piled our plates high till her tears went away. Me, I like to grow trees, watch how they're raised from under black dirt with water and sun, and gift their fruits in the sparkles Ma saved.
Oh, that's a beautiful poem. And then, if for those watching, you can see the photo too, image by Idolo Mello, of a woman handing a fruit out. Yeah, beautiful photo and beautiful poem. I love the slant rhymes in there too. Hemet, you're really taking off with that as a style.
Thank you.
Thank
you so much.
Yeah, it was Hemet Malak with fruit fresh from the oven. Now let's go next to Jared Campbell. I'm going to try to be a little more random with my selections of people. Here we go. Hey, Jared.
Hey, how are you doing?
Great. Good to see you.
Good to see you.
So what have you got for us?
If you've got the image up, because the photo's important, but it's a gibbon that lives at the Kansas City Zoo.
Yeah, really interesting. A very forlorn looking, light-haired gibbon of some sort. Yeah.
Yep. So the male swung gracefully from rope to rope, turning and returning through the spacious top half of the enclosure. The female sat. When Benjamin asked, "Why is she so sad?" I thought of anthropomorphism and the pathetic fallacy, but didn't say so. I ran my fingers through his hair and said, "You're right, she does look sad." A zookeeper overheard. "She lost a baby about a year ago, and ever since she hasn't been herself," she said. I took a picture through the glass. Benjamin turned away and ran to see the porcupine. I followed at a distance.
Oh, what a sweet, sad poem that is. Thanks for sharing that. And that given and definitely fits the image and really cool thing to pick too, to write about.
Thank you.
Yeah, thanks, Jared. Always a pleasure. That was Jared Campbell with Portrait of a Gibbon. Next, let's go to Nate Jacob.
Hey.
Hey, Nate. Good to see you.
Good to see you. All right. Kind of like Jared, my photo is of a ape.
Oh, wow. That's interesting. What are the odds?
Right?
Yeah.
Great minds think alike.
I guess so.
So I was reading headlines this week and saw something about apes learning sign language and how they never got to a point where they asked a question.
Oh yeah, I read that once, and that's really fascinating, I think. And I wonder if did they just syntactically never understand that, or do they actually have no interest in other people?
That's what I was thinking,
Yeah.
or they just don't care to know what we think.
Yeah, that's. I wonder. Yeah, I wonder if they never asked a question of each other.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So this is loosely based on that idea and that photo. The primal drive to misunderstand. You will know disappointment, but never know our word for disappointment. You just never asked. And after all, what are these words you insist we share, but hands coming together and parting, fingers flare, palms upturned to keep the hairless buffoons from feeling that the world they cage us away from could in any way be threatened by us, beasts who ask no questions. No wonder we keep it simple for you. Ask nothing to understand your ways when your awful way is to lord over us, so sure of your rightful place. The difference in our thumbs, all the proof you need. In our language, though, you will never realize it because you yourselves never think to ask and cannot see when you are so unwilling to see. We share a human-like sign, a middle finger raised always to your backs, out of sight of observers. Our signed word for disappointment, an ape's synonym for disenchantment, disillusionment, dissatisfaction, and discontent. On other occasions, your primate cousins may also express discouragement and bafflement at your heirs. But to keep this as simple as possible for creatures of your ilk, hard-headed beasts, we will stick with this one simple gesture to let you know we are disappointed in you, mock you for believing you are number one. At best, you are number two, something we apes laugh about too hard for such smart things, but who or what doesn't love a poop joke?
Oh, thanks. Great ending there, Nate. Really fun poem and interesting thing to think about too. You know, I do love at the zoo. The LA Zoo here is a especially big chimpanzee exhibit, and so taking the kids there and just staring at them and wondering what is going on in their heads is always an endless fascination. Thanks for sharing that.
Thanks a lot, Tim.
Yeah, take care. That was Nate Jacob with the primal drive to misunderstand. Let's go next to Laura Berg.
Hello.
Hey, Laura, great to see you.
Great variety of photos we're getting.
Yeah, I always love it when there's a photo or like an art piece or something in the prompt because there's so many fun things to look at.
Yeah. So I found this beautiful image. I think she's a geisha.
Mm-hmm.
So here it is.
Okay.
Image search. Geisha in the Meiji era. There you pose beside a straw window shade, young stranger in sepia looking out. Your brushed hair drapes like an ermine stole down to the knees, over an obi patterned with anemones. Balanced on the sill, one manicured hand holds a fan, schooled to transfix. And so I stare, a grandma in America in 2024 with no right to stare, trying not to orientalize, no idea of your name, whether you chose this walk in life, what you might have felt when your picture was taken. And I project, imagining you also become a mama, a grandma, and by now, counting from your era, a great-great-grandma. Perhaps you were peering far into the future, toward your great-great-granddaughter, freshman year at Nara University School of Engineering, where she's reading about the Chanakali Bridge, newly built in your day, that still spans the Dardanelles. She looks at a screen, not through one. She doesn't wear a kimono, paint watercolor scrolls, or strum the shamisen, and she's no master of pouring tea or polite conversation. But you love the way her heart flutters at the thought of numbers, and the wonder she shows when perusing your photo, the way you knew how to lean into a sunbeam and gaze outward at the available world with such level, steady eyes. She wants to make things that span place and time.
Such beautiful description of that photo. I mean, we don't have an image itself, but we have such a perfectly described image. I can really see it in my mind's eye. Thanks so much for sharing that, Laura. That was great.
Yeah.
Thanks. That was Laura Berg with image search, geisha at the Meiji era, and so much research into that too. That was a really fascinating poem. I wonder if I pull up, if I just search this in images, what'll happen? Will we get the one she was describing? I'm not seeing it exactly. All right. Let's go next to Lisa McDougald.
Hi, everyone.
Hey, Lisa. Great to see you.
Good to see you, too.
So what have you got for us?
Okay. Do you have the image by chance?
I do. Which one? Do you want to show the image first or the poem first?
I don't know. Okay, I'll maybe the poem.
Okay, let's hear the poem. So, yeah, okay.
Do you want me to tell the background or how I got there, or do you
Yeah,
want me to-
sure. Yeah, how'd you get there?
Okay. I was looking, organic Google search, and I loved the transits, and I love this time of year and the festivals going on, and This one intrigued me because I started thinking about the space of mystery and how this time of year is magical for, we put things in the ground, the seeds in the ground, and there's this mystery that happens and it's unseen, and the imagination runs wild this time. And through that imagination, ideas and invention is ripe to occur. And so that's kind of where I was thinking about this. So,
Well, very interesting. Yeah, so let's hear it.
okay. Girl in transit. Dusk traces her face in silhouette. Yellow hair, flecks in the chilling air. Sun conjunct her features disappear. Power horns, animal crown, girl transformed.
Ah, very interesting. And now let's reveal the image. Yeah, that's a really cool. There you go. Really cool photograph that you found there.
Thank
The
you.
horns and silhouette. And this is one of those
What I
episodes
mean,
too.
mystery. It's
Uh-huh.
that mystery in there. You just don't know. She could be a human transforming into something. You just don't know. It's kind of neat to let your imagination run wild.
Yeah, it definitely is. A very cool poem and a good, remind everybody if you're just listening, this is one of those episodes that'd be great to hear on or to watch on YouTube rather than just listen in the audio version later. So come back in and see all these wonderful images. Yeah, thanks for sharing that, Lisa.
You bet. Thank you.
Yep. Yeah, that was Lisa McDougald with the poem "A Girl in Transit." Really interesting title too. And Lisa followed the prompt actually, which I did not. I completely forgot that we were supposed to write short poems, and I think a bunch of people forgot as well. So, but good job, Lisa, following through on that aspect too. Let's go to Nancy Tennell next.
Hi, what an evening this has been.
Oh, it's just always so much fun,
Oh,
Nancy,
my
and so much
goodness.
more fun that you're here as
Oh,
always.
well, my poem tonight is a little serious. It first started as a poet's respond, but I think it just was waiting for Katie's prompt
Interesting.
because
Yeah.
I found a picture that just brought it to life all over again for me. I did shorten it by a stanza from what it was originally, but it's called "Oh My Lord." And this refrain in it is actually, one of the lesser known field songs from slave days. Do you have the picture up?
I do. Yeah. Mhm.
Okay. The sugarcane plantations have disappeared, but footprints are still embedded in the soil. Those of the Sapelo Island slave workers whose scarred and broken bodies labored to cut the cane and put it under the rollers. Oh, my Lord, oh, my good Lord, keep me from sinking down. The oozing sucrose could not sweeten their lives, but they have traveled many roads since then. Every year they ferry back to celebrate the ancestors who gave them strength and identity, these proud descendants of the Gullah Geechee. Oh, my Lord, oh, my good Lord, keep me from sinking down. Today they will set aside the ancient misery and come together to shout and rejoice. But injustice is sometimes both irony and tragedy, and it will reach out from the wretched past to pull the ferry dock down as they walk. Oh, my Lord, oh, my good Lord, keep me from sinking down.
Oh, that was lovely, Nancy. Great use of the refrain in that poem. That was
you.
"Oh My Lord" by Nancy Tennell. Thanks, Nancy.
Uh-huh.
Yeah. All right, and next let's go to France. Make sure we get Siobhan in before she falls asleep sitting up like I did the other day.
Hello, hello,
Hey, Siobhan, great to see you.
hello. So if you scroll down on my poem, you've got I've got two images actually. They're two men who are scientists from the early 20th century. Have you found the images?
I do, yeah. And I don't recognize them, I have to say. So who are they?
So on the left-hand side is Erwin Schrödinger, and on the right-hand side, Werner Heisenberg, and they were both separately Nobel Prize winners for physics, Schrödinger in 1933 and Heisenberg in 1932. So I refer to some of their equations and theories at the beginning of the poem, and then it proceeds more to process of discovery. So the poem is called, Is Quantum Physics Poetry?
Great question.
Location of a particle is unknown, an indeterminate probability wave until measured. The analogical cat could be dead, poisoned, and alive until its box is opened. The more certain the speed of a particle, the less certain will be its location, and vice versa. At long distance, particles turn and dance in sync. The mites may traverse walls. Those are microscopic feats, marginal for most of us and essential for our technologies. Discovered through creating images and mental connections, scientists freeing themselves from common understandings, risking a new language within language. Logic and intuition intertwine, allowing words to be modified by the world, and just like verse varies with the reader, reality varies with the observing instrument. Struggling in the eternal illusion of all, they write poetry.
Very cool. So the answer is yes. And great rhythms in that too, and really interesting to see their photos. For two people who've heard their names so often, I have no idea what they look like. Could not pick them out of a lineup. So that's interesting to see too. Thanks, Siobhan.
Good. Okay. Thanks very much, everyone.
Yeah, thanks. That was Siobhan Brownlee with Is Quantum Physics Poetry? Let's go next to Chelsea McClellan. Hey, Chelsea, are you there? Hello.
Yes. Hi.
Great to see you. Thanks for being here.
Yeah, great to see you too. So I found a photographer first named Walker Evans, and I ended up finding a portrait of Walker Evans done by a man named Arnold Crane.
Oh, interesting. Yeah, so here it's on screen now for everybody watching. Yeah. So that's a great portrait too.
Yes. And I found out after I wrote this poem that he did end up doing some writing later in his life. But the story I read before I wrote the poem was about his early life and how he had wanted to be a writer and then gave up on that and entered photography instead.
That's interesting.
So my poem is Dinner Matters. On the couch at the end of the day, does a photographer quit or begin? Cigar lit, the smoke rolls through a man who's seen the worst of dust bowls, children put to work on the homestead, patchwork chicken coops and dresses, and still had to go home in his suit. Is it that one finger holding up his head, or his head which lifts the finger? And which fingers dug the potatoes? And does it matter if the whole family still isn't fed? Another breath of tobacco finds convincing notes of clove and leather and old unwritten books, and he wonders if he should have been a writer.
Oh, that's very cool. Really cool slant rhyme in that. And I love the whole fingers run too with the head. Is it the head that lifts the fingers? Yeah, very cool. That's a really great portrait and a cool poem from it. Thanks for sharing that, Chelsea.
Thank you.
Yeah,
bye-bye.
It was Chelsea McClellan with Dinner Matters, after a photograph of Walker Evans by Arnold Crane. Yeah, very cool. All right, next let's go to Brian O'Sullivan.
Hello.
Hey, Brian, how you doing today?
I'm doing good, but I did realize that I cheated in two ways.
Oh, two
Not only
cheats.
is it-
Okay. Well, you're the winner of the cheating today.
Oh, yay.
Everyone else only cheated once.
So it's not only not really short, but I've totally forgot somehow that the portrait was specifically supposed to be a photographic portrait.
That's
So-
funny because I did too, actually. So my
Okay.
first thing, I was trying to think of like portraits, paintings that I'd seen.
Yeah.
And then I remembered that it was a photograph, so I was even more in trouble on the plane with no internet.
I
So
figure
I
my-
almost made
my-
the same mistake.
Thank you for telling me that. I appreciate it. And I figure that my excuse is that since I've only seen these photos on the internet, they're really probably photographic reproductions. So
Oh, there you go. Well, it's definitely not. Maybe someday Elon Musk will invent a screen that actually makes the oil painting, but
There you go.
until then.
I hope not. Yeah, so it's really based. Also, I don't think this is really a cheat, but it's also based on two portraits. It's Holbein's portraits of Henry VIII and of Anne of Cleves, and it also has an epigraph, and it's called "The King's Painter Speaks." Even if you think you're happily married, you're probably going to get divorced. Timothy Green, The Poetry Space.
Which is
So-
Dick Westheimer, I have to say, as Dick Westheimer pointed out, that stat is not true, that most marriages end in divorce. It's just something people say, and it's completely fictitious, apparently, but I never looked it up.
I'm glad you didn't look it up because I found it very enjoyable. It was just really funny. All right. King's Painter Speaks. So they call my painting propaganda, do they? Indeed, it propagated the beats of my heart in a court where to paint an old fat king as an old fat king might have been to paint the head right off my body. And in truth, and in justice too, that portrait of the king propagated my reputation, for what other hand could shave off the years while making full the beard? His rich garments, the burgundy, the gold, the jewels, were accurate and his, but the confident smile was fabricated in mine. His own had been shattered on a bloody day at the tilt yards, and only my art could restore it. Nothing could restore the days when he and Queen Catherine would take their meals together and lose their separate selves in mirth and a communion of their royal minds and bodies. But they could never have been happy, really. They bonded on command when poor Arthur died and despair was needed. Hearts bound by politics would split by politics. Later, after the witch and the howling of the wolves, they said to me, Holbein, go to Cleves, go capture the Duke's sister. Only you can render her truly for the king's right judgment. They winked, and I knew my brief. And sure, I smoothed a blemish, made right a rogue curve or two, but I painted an honest picture of her grace. Despite what the king would be pleased to say, she was no horse. When he spurned her, I feared for my life. A king's blame flows more easily than strong drink at a wastrel's assailing. Somehow I survived. I worried about Anne as well. She'd been a congenial subject. But I need not have worried. Innocent as the young Puritan seemed, she played the game wisely, accepting the divorce and all the houses and honors she showered on her with it. After the divorce, they were happy together. She was proclaimed the king's beloved sister. Then for Henry there is another farcical marriage. But what will be remembered is the image of youthful vigor, Harry, the painter's king.
That's great. Very fun poem, Brian. The King
Thanks.
Painter Speaks. Yeah,
Thank
thanks
you.
so much for sharing that. Very fun.
My pleasure.
Yeah, thanks. That was Brian O'Sullivan with a really fun poem. The King's Painter Speaks. With an epigraph by yours truly, and that is from the Poetry Space, which being Katie did was a date night episode, which meant it was just me and her having no idea what we were going to do. We picked a bunch of poems about divorce and then talked about them and read our own, and that was a lot of fun. It is a cheap date, I have to say that. And a lot of fun. So check that out on that's Katie's podcast, but it's the Poetry Space. You can find that on iTunes, Spotify, etc. Let's go to Nivedita next.
Hey Tim.
Hey,
How you
Nivi,
doing?
great to see you.
Good to be here. Your daylight saving started, and that's pushed me forward by another hour here.
Is that good for you or bad?
It's good. I mean, it's 8:30, so it's not much of a difference. Earlier was probably 7:30 to 8. Now it's 7:30 to 9. So For me, it's still in the morning, and
Well, I'm
I'm
really
up
glad
and
you can
about,
get
so it's
away,
fine for me.
from work whenever you want to pop in and do the reading. So that's great.
That's because I managed to finish my work on time, so nobody keeps breathing down my
Yeah,
neck.
well, that's perfect. I'm glad. I'm glad for that. So what'd you do with the prompt?
Random Google image, and the first three images that I don't know why popped up were of people reading.
Oh, really? That's
Surprisingly.
interesting. Yeah. Well, I'll put this on the screen. So this is the one
Yeah.
you included the link for it. So it's a man reading on a park
Yeah.
bench. Yeah.
Yes, an old man reading on a park bench. That's the one I chose of the three.
Uh-huh.
Poem short, as usual.
Well, go ahead.
So here goes. Read, only time will tell. In the silence between pages, he lets his thumb pause over yellowed edges, remnants of a life thumbed through, as if each line could bring back a season, each crease a lost name. A thin line on his brow speaks of promises left behind, of mornings bathed in first light that drifted away like letters never sent. What brought him here? A quiet bench, an open book. Yet he reads nothing, waits for nothing, holding on only to time itself, to the rough, solid warmth of the wood beneath his hand.
I love that last stanza in particular. Really cool. Thanks for sharing that, Nivi.
I think with this poem, everybody's endings are just the ones that seem to capture you the most. I mean, Siobhan, Nate, Jared, everybody, like the endings were just there.
Oh, that's
I
great.
think
Well,
the
yours
sort of poem
definitely is
just
too. I
fits
really
into
love where you
ending.
went with that. Yeah. Well, thanks so much for sharing that, Nivi.
Thank you, Tim. Have a lovely evening.
Yep. Have a great day.
Thank you.
Yep. That was Nivi DeKarthik with a Read. Great poem. Let's go next to Bijwajit Mishra.
Hey, Tim. Good evening. How are
Hey,
you?
Biz. Good to see you.
Good.
So you went with a photograph. How did you come to this? So this is a photograph of what's the actor's name?
Idris Elba. Idris Elba.
Okay, yeah, I'm bad with celebrities. I don't really watch. But
Yeah.
Idris
I
Elba.
mean, he's a British actor, but he's done his voice in Lion King and stuff like that. I love his voice. But first I searched, and there were some paintings came up as you saw, and I thought, Katie, I went back to the prompt, and she said a photograph, and you don't personally know. Then I said, okay, free use portrait photographs. Then I think his photo came up with some others, so I just picked it up. Obviously, I don't know him personally. I think it's okay.
Well, that sounds perfect. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. So could you have been more successful? I cannot unknow you, although that was the expectation when I pulled a random photo from the internet. But I still don't know you, especially your frowny look in the portrait, that intense gaze into what the photographer asked you to focus at, maybe a vase, one of the designer ones, which would have cost a fortune at least in my world. But in my world of words, I can reduce you to a page, knowing or not. You came a long way to make a place in the movie world with your height and the depth in your voice, and yet your eyes are trained at the distant shine, a shimmer from the movie that got someone an Oscar, or that one yet to come, or that one person you have carried in you all these years, which is so private and hidden that sometimes you have to look hard at a distance to bring them home. That's that. There's that and there is this between which your eyes fleet, but you will keep looking, I know, and it will keep on until the grays outnumber the blacks in your beard, Idris.
That's great. Great description of that photo too. The intensity of that gaze and the expression there. Thanks for sharing that, Biz.
Thank you.
Yeah, another fun poem. Yeah, I really do love the prompts where we get an image to see too. Let's go next to Christiana Doucette.
Hello.
Hey, Christiana, how you doing tonight?
Doing all right. I have I went with a portrait of Laura Haviland. I love history. as I've shared here. And actually, this was really good because I finally wrote a poem that was not a hurricane poem.
Oh, that's
after
great.
like
So,
a month.
yeah, well, that's wonderful that, moving on, of course, very important
Yeah.
too. But who's Laura Haviland? That name sounds kind of
So,
familiar, but I don't really recognize it.
she was an abolitionist at the starting in like 1830s. She was a Michigan pioneer, part of the Quaker community there. And she and a poet, Elizabeth Chandler, formed the first abolitionist society in Michigan.
Oh, cool.
She actually broke with the Quaker sect that she was part of because they were not strongly enough against slavery. And then she formed a school with her husband, and it was the first integrated school back in the 1830s in Adrian, Michigan. And I think she's just a fascinating person.
Yeah, she sounds
I
like
think
a
I've
great
mentioned here
woman. Yeah.
before, I grew up in fundamentalist Christianity, and one of the things that really just like draws me to her is that I feel like she was living in a time where maybe she felt similar drives to what I have, where it's like, I don't understand why people don't care about people who are in being oppressed, or people will say horrible, awful things about other people. One of the things I love about her is that throughout her entire life, she always sees humanity in everyone. And she does something when someone's in trouble. There's a story, I reference it briefly in here, but there's a story of when she was trying to help one Black gentleman escape to Canada. And in the middle of that, the bushwhackers who had come up from South Carolina area tracked her down and him down, and on a train or just beside a train, put a gun to her head. And she felt so settledly that God is the only one who could touch a hair of her head. And if it was his will, then she would die. But otherwise, she was going to stand there and do whatever she felt was the right thing. And they ended up leaving, getting chased out. And there's a bunch of stories like that. She has an autobiography that she wrote in her 80s or 90s that's really interesting. It's called A Woman's Life, Work, and Labors. It does have some really hard things to read in it, though. So, I mean, like, there's some really awful descriptions of what she saw in slavery. And let's see, there was something else I wanted to share about her before I read. Anyway, I just think she's a very fascinating person. And this photo, I took a photo of this in Adrian, Michigan last year when I went up because my dad had that aneurysm. One afternoon, I went out to Adrian, Michigan, and they let me look through their archives and even like look through her journals and take pictures. And so I took this picture of the actual photo. Oh, I know what it was. I know what I wanted to say. She was a friend of Susan B. Anthony. And as I was looking through the portrait gallery, actually, and the Library of Congress photos, I found that they had Susan B. Anthony's journals. And so I looked up Laura Haviland, and she appears in the journals a couple of times. And Susan B. Anthony calls her Mother Haviland because she looked up to her, and she was an inspiration to her.
Oh, wow.
So,
very cool. Well, great history lesson here. Thanks for sharing that, Christiana.
So this is Laura Haviland's portrait at 80. Her eyes say, "Men of their time, see this face of mine, see the lines fallen to me in pleasant places. 30 years before the Civil War, I make spaces for Black children beside white in my integrated school, despite roving bushwhackers and twisted state rules. Parents' ire cannot pinch a line of mean in me. I see humanity in every man and woman, master, slave, both the craven and the brave, the desperate parent, the forsaken child, and when I am reviled, I revile not again, but pray for mercy on their souls and Satan's hold to be broken. This is not a token gesture. This is the texture of my life. In a plague of family loss, I take up my cross and follow the still small voice to Ohio and back. I pack a bag, snag a train, and conduct across the Mason-Dixon line. Back home, I rally Adrian men to carry horns so we can warn when snatchers catch wind of rescues and run them off. I reject the blend of religiosity and power demanding black folks be returned. I defend my neighbors. Let me be burned. I do not bend, but stand eye to eye with evil, sure that I am where I ought. Sure that this spot where I face down that gun, that town where they try to run me out, those signs maligning my name and calling bounty hunters out to claim my head and their prize, cannot pry loose one hair without God's will. I stand still. I stand still and certain that the sermon shouted about how man belongs to man, how I am in rebellion, how the hellion abolitionists have communist plans, and any law that bans their own mastery must be dastardly demonic theft, has left all reason. This is not treason. I stand still when the sharp-taloned eagle dives. I stand still for those mistreated mothers, captive almost wives, and all the lives they've sold away from her. I stand still. What is the eagle to the lamb? One crying terror and attack, the other clothing bare back, warming frozen feet. I claim the lamb. Let God judge which of us he damns. I stand still, and to my end I will. When you remember men of this time, remember also, it is mine.
Yeah, very cool poem and great performance of it too. Thanks so much for sharing that, Christiana, and also fitting with Joseph Millar's poems. They all the rhyme, even though it's not regularly metered. It's sprinkled in throughout in a really wonderful way for a great performance too. Thanks for sharing that.
Thank you. If you have a chance, look up her autobiography because it is well worth reading, and it's on Google Books.
Oh, very cool.
You can get a copy of it there.
Oh, great. Well, thanks so much. Yeah, great tip and cool poem. All right, take care. That was Christiana Doucette with Laurel Haviland's Portrait at 80. Yeah, interesting stuff. Let's go to Mike Bales next.
Yeah, I'm in a new broadcast place. I moved.
I noticed a different angle.
I went to a small space to renting the entire upstairs of a house. This is my writing area.
Oh,
I can
nice.
show over there. There's one with the first painting I ever made. I'm going to painting this in the backdrop.
Oh, can you move it more? We didn't see it. Can you move the camera even more so we can?
You're going to have to tell me when you see it.
Okay. Oh, a little lower. You got to go a little lower. There. Oh, there we go. That's really cool. Yeah.
Yeah. The instructor, her, which was slender. Mine ended up being big. I noticed that. I learned that no painting's the same as the other.
Uh-huh.
They all have their little quirks, which I guess is the neat thing about painting. Something about you comes out and your piece is different than any other piece.
Yeah, it definitely does.
So,
and in poetry too. Voices are unique. Yeah.
I first tried to go down to the special collections part of the Davenport Public Library Saturday, but it's closed.
Mm-hmm.
There they've got a lot of history of Davenport.
Uh-huh.
Then I went to somewhere else and I was clicking on figures of Davenport, but I figured I might know these people, so I just went to a random thing. I don't know if my link works for you for the image.
I'm
I'm
trying to find the poem. I don't see it, Mike.
Well, I emailed it to you. It's under prompt lines. I don't know.
Didn't
if
go
I
to
don't
spam. Yeah, I'm not seeing it, Mike.
I can just read it if that's okay.
Yeah. Why don't you go ahead and just read it and describe what the image is.
The title and the heading's wrong anyway. The image was black and white. I did want something black and white. It may be something that looked from maybe the early 1900s. I wanted it kind of historical, and it was four men with weird shape. They were lined up and they had weird shaped hoes, and they were kind of creating some kind of trench in the side of a hill. I figured it could be Iowa history or Midwest history. And the title of the poem's called Land Husbandry. Four men lined up on the hill, instruments in hand, are trenching the side of the hill. Clouds are forming in the sky, and they're rushing to beat the rain. The rain, they know, gives life to the plot of the ground claimed at the edge of a frontier. by a farmer to raise his family. They live off the land. To the west, a grove of pines waits to break winter winds and to bear the storm they know, to bear the hot days and rain and the trials of life each day. 4 men lined up on a hill.
Yeah, well, very interesting poem and good description of the image too, even though we couldn't see it. It's really, really good, well described, interesting. Thanks for sharing that.
Thanks.
Yeah.
I've been learning more about useful repetitions.
Yeah, we could definitely hear that.
My confession would be from one of the people I raved about, Carol Pagel, who I've seen and read in person, and who was actually a co-instructor of this writers conference that I went to this summer, this workshop.
Yeah, well, very cool. Well, glad to hear that. Yeah, thanks for sharing that, Mike.
Okay, thanks.
Thanks. That was Mike Bales with, I think it was called Land Management, you said?
Land Husbandry.
Husbandry, that's right. Land Husbandry. Thanks, Mike. Let's go next to Tina Denetclaw.
Hello.
Hey, Tina. Great to see you.
Yeah,
Good.
great to see you too. So now I have 4 things I'm managing because I discovered I can have you on my phone. And then it took me a long time when I came back to sit down because I had the last Zoom or the last YouTube running also for some reason. And so I had extra voices going on.
Oh, wow.
I couldn't figure out where it was coming from.
Well, I'm glad you got it all sorted out.
One place was my phone. So, all right. So, yeah, I was in the submission Sunday for the Hudson Valley Writers Center or something. And so I had mentioned to them that, I write poems that nobody understands. And somebody put in there that, maybe you don't have enough information in there. And I think that's probably my problem. So this is probably going to be another one. There's a surface understanding, but what I really mean is way underneath it. So, and also I want to just make clear that I don't mean to be disrespectful or offend anybody. My dad was a Marine, bodyguard to the Admiral on the USS Estes. My brother was a Marine. He served in the Gulf War. They volunteered. But my brother was getting close to drafting age back during Vietnam, and that was a very upsetting time for me. So I'm only really writing this from my perspective, and I have a lot of respect for people who serve the country.
Yeah.
So that's what it is. And then the poem, the picture should be last. That picture, even though coincidentally my nephew put it on Facebook, like right after I decided to do this poem, that was the picture I was already thinking about.
Oh wow, that's really strange coincidence.
Yeah, I didn't have to go look for it, and it was and it's perfect. Okay.
Wow.
So here we go, and another. Okay, so greatness in a different fight. Yes, your face is pretty for all the world to see, and you tell us how pretty. Evidence of your dance away, from leathered fist after fist after fist after fist, and still, you are so pretty. Your words are sleight of hand, mesmerizing us with your wide eyes, while you teach us tolerance. At draft induction, quiet, refused step forward, stood up for us all.
Yeah, very interesting. And then pictured below, well, I'll just read this because I started to picture below.
Okay.
In 1981, Muhammad Ali talked a desperate man down from a ledge. Ali cried as he talked to the man and earned his trust. Then Ali followed through with his promise to show this man's family, the world, and the man himself that the man is not nobody, that he is valued. And so that's from 1981. And here's the photo. That's an amazing story. I didn't know that.
Oh, good.
Yeah.
Muhammad Ali was actually a very spiritual person. And I think he used his fame to kind of minister to all of us in ways we didn't recognize. But, he was telling us his poems that we thought were odd, but they were really like strategy. And I just think he's a Renaissance man.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah, well, definitely. He definitely is. Yeah, thanks for sharing that. Yeah, very interesting interweaving of different ideas, too. Thanks, Tina.
Thank you.
Yeah, it was Tina Denetclaw with Greatness in a Different Fight. Let's go next to Steve Harrell. Steve, is it Steve Horrell or Steve Harrell?
Steve Horrell.
Horrell. Sorry about that. I just
Yeah,
guess
no,
every
that's
time.
fine.
Okay.
You've had it right up to this point.
Yeah, that's what I think. It sounded wrong when that came out of my mouth. Okay. Well, good.
Anyway, I didn't cheat, but I can explain my deficiency because I don't have a picture. I was back east visiting my sister when this prompt was rolling through my head, and I saw this picture of this woman who was, you only saw part of her face, but she was cut. It was just obvious she was in some sort of distress, and it was anyway. So on the plane, which I'm very seldom on the plane back, I wrote most of this on the plane, so I do not have a picture.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, well, I can definitely understand that.
And anyway, I called this erosion. The burst of love, the joy of mornings together, familiarity of flesh, her hair falling over his chest. The times they drove to the coast, clutching the waves, binding together the salt lick of bodies, laughing and dreaming of eternity. Somehow, the daily erosion set in. He found respite in others. She found less and less. The mountain of love eroded into a delta of grief spreading out from her feet. But every morning she tries to extract a shard of joy from the return of the sun, from birdsong, a new bird at the feeder. She tries and tries.
Yeah, thanks for sharing that, Steve. Another poem with a great ending. Love that delta of grief is a great line and image. Thanks for sharing that.
Okay.
Yeah.
Great evening, by the way. I'm now getting at least one of his books right off the bat.
Oh, excellent. Yeah, well, I'm glad to hear that. I don't have Overtime, so I'm thinking about trying to find a copy of that myself.
Yeah. Well, I have to admit that I always really like to relate to people that have spent their life doing other things.
Mm-hmm.
I guess maybe because that's what I've done.
Yeah, well, definitely. Well, yeah.
Right. I'm not a recovering academic at all.
Well, that's
Anyway.
always cool too. I definitely relate to that. Thanks, Steve.
Good evening.
Yep, that was Steve Horrell with Erosion. And let's go next to Dr. Q. Hey, Dr.
Hello.
Hey, great to hear you. Yeah, we got the image. Good to see you. How you doing?
You've got me.
I do. Yeah, hello.
Hey. So much good history tonight, I have to say.
Yeah, it's really interesting. I do love when we get to explore just different things and perspectives in addition to the poem. It's like a bonus double fun every time we have an image or something like that to go with it.
Yeah. So my poem, it was supposed to be about somebody you don't know, right?
Mhm.
And so I really don't know the guy or didn't. But he is my second cousin.
Oh, interesting.
Twice removed. So anyway.
So this is old Ben Fullingham.
Yes. I don't think anybody's ever heard of this character, but there's a lot of people in California who knew him. He staked a claim for mining, and he stayed there for 50 years on the mountain. So anyway, well, I'll just read the poem for you.
Yeah, go ahead.
And I kind of cheated like some of the others. Maybe Katie should do reverse psychology on us and tell us we should write an epic poem. So anyway, here we go. In times of need, trendsetters. Long after Greeks used a pen to hold their togas together, long after Queen Victoria offered a pen to a soldier struggling with his kilt in windy weather, long after pregnant Aztec women wore safety pins during an eclipse, lest a jaguar eat them, long after Walter Hunt sold his safety pin patent for $400 back in 1842. But long before high schoolers used a safety pin to pierce a lip, before In-N-Out cooks used them to fasten aprons, before the "you're safe around me" virtue signalers, before Versace embellished couture gowns with safety pins, long before Richard Hell and Johnny Rocker used pins to hold their fraying clothes together, lest their asses hang out. But before safety pins made plaid look punk, there was old Ben with Nugget, his burro loaded up, a pick, axe, and a shovel, scraggly beard, faded shirt, half tucked into a worn jeans, and a safety pin stuck on his hat. Climbing down the mountain to mount or fetch provisions, maybe a sack of red yams on sale. And it could have been he used that big old pin as more than keeping his hat pin back. He might have been using that pin as a way to spear fish in the creek, or it could have been a pin of rock climbing grade, or old Ben might have used that pin to pin down his enemies, if and he had any, which is doubtful. Or maybe like the Aztec women, he was wearing it to protect himself from evil, or women, because after a bitter divorce, after his wedded wife of 12 years wed his brother, he swore he'd never love another woman again. All along the narrow way, katiedyds.
Oh, that's wonderful. I really love the haiku at the end. Yeah, beautiful and great character sketch of I've forgotten his name because what was his name again?
Old Ben Fullingham.
Old Ben Fullingham. Yeah, because I kept thinking of we have a guy like that, Tom Vincent, in our local lore, who everybody is a legend in the mountains here. Vincent Gap is named after him in the mine, and very very similar kind of character. Really interesting. Yeah, great description of him, and I love the way it moves into that haiku. Thanks for sharing that.
And he inspired me to go get a pen for my hat.
Yeah. So for those who's listening, Dr. Q's got a big old pin on her hat. Thanks, Dr. Q.
Thank you. And thank you for having the poetry Rattlecast every week. I really enjoyed this guy tonight, Joseph. Man, what a guy.
Yeah, he is. And so down to earth. I just love that about him too.
Yeah. So anyway.
Yeah. Well,
every week I say this is the best one we've had.
Well, thanks. I appreciate that.
Okay, thank you. Goodbye.
Thanks. Yep, that was Dr. Q with In Times of Need, Trendsetters. Let's go to Zachary Honey. Got to see part 2 of the poem. What do we got, Zach?
Hey, Tim. How's it going?
It's going good.
Yeah.
So does this fit on one page, I got to say?
Okay, so I gave you, I don't have a nervous breakdown. I just have the whole thing here, but I'm only reading part 2, yes.
Okay. And only read a page. We really got to keep it to a page. I'm getting tired.
It's just a hair over a page. It goes from 2 to 3. You see it there. It starts on page 2 at the half page and goes to page 3. Can I read that section?
That's okay. Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Okay, awesome. The Man Called Cold. Part 2. Indrid Cold, their masked eyebrows raised again, could have done the talking. Raised as high as an outlaw about to be hung before sunset out west. So high they might float off their faces like a ghost without rest. Meanwhile, in the corner of my eye, I noted Batman was still gawking. I like your costume, said Harley, stooping toward the frozen boy. No reply. Do you like my costume? Blurted out Spock with a rush of nervous joy, the pitch of which sounded a bit like the brisk rustle of a sigh of wind, or perhaps the squeal of a cellar mouse that was pinched on the ass with a glassy thumbtack by the spirit of a resident known to have passed. Like nerves jumping off for the high dive, then regretting it, unable to rescind. That alien guy with the tan that visited the planet Lanulos? Plop, I heard my sister giving my drowned friends candy from the bowl. The grinning man that stopped the salesman on Route 77 in West Virginia. She smiled and said, I'll give you a little more, but you mustn't tell a soul. I think Batman nodded while my friends looked at me like I was nuts. 6:12 p.m. Some bleeding scream masks passed them, waking the dead carpet of autumn leaves where it had rained, quickly crunching up the driveway under bat-laced eaves. Then the overworked parents, already tuckered as zombies, with scurrying kids, the swift and slow steps describing each one of them hobbling over a trail of guts. 6:14 p.m. Want to see me do a backflip, Skylar? Batman implored me eagerly, trying hard to make me watch him more than Spock with his version of cool things. Shaking my head, I said, "No, don't do that." Light footsteps. "I love your fairy wings." "Where's Mike?" I asked, referring to the boy who lived across the street from me. He was a red-haired boy who had dressed up as Charlie Brown and also wrote poetry. Told them I'd be leaving soon. Dad would not be home till he was finished with his biz. Then the dark night took my arm a little tight and, kissing my hand, said, "Don't worry, my lady. Somebody knows where he is." I almost dropped the bowl with fright while the five of them raced off into the night.
Okay, that's good, Scott. I'm muting your microphone for a second, and that is the page limit, but we'll do part 2 and 3 next time. We can unmute you now. Oh, you're still muted. But yeah, thanks, Zach. We got to keep that serious to the one page. But I appreciate it. So that's last week's prompt, was to write about someone in costume. And this is an ongoing series that we're doing from Zachary Honeycutt.
Thank you, guys. See you guys next week
Awesome.
with the
Thanks,
rest.
Zach. Yeah. Zachary Honeycutt once again with another section from his epic poem here, The Man Called Cold. If you want to read the first part of it or hear it, go back to last week's episode. 2 people left on the Zoom, and we got Carla Schwartz up next.
Hi.
Hey, Carla, great to see you.
Nice to be here. I'm a little suffering under the East Coast would-be midnight.
Oh, that's true.
You know,
for me, it was this glorious thing because I had a softball game like really early in the morning, and I realized I get an extra hour of sleep. And so it was like it was at 9 a.m. instead of 8, which made all the difference. So that was really good for me. But it make it later than it should be, doesn't it?
Yes. Well, lucky for you, I actually did keep to the prompt, and I have a pretty short poem. It's a triolet. It's a triolet.
Oh, that's nice.
So it's only 8 lines. And the picture, there's a link. You can show it first. And I actually got stuck on looking at this picture for a long time this week and wrote various poems about it. But this one is the one that I submitted tonight. And it's so this is Benjamin Netanyahu when he was in the IDF when he was 18 years old. So I don't know if you could show that, but anyway.
Yeah, I just found it. So here it is.
Okay.
This is Benjamin Netanyahu. Interesting. Okay,
Right,
here we go.
right. So this is called Triolet for Netanyahu.
Okay.
Can you blame a man whose mother was a bully for his actions on the land as if bullets had no targets when his mother attacked her neighbors willy-nilly? Can you blame a man who was raised up by a bully, a man who idolized his older brother who was unruly, that brother taken by the land, a target for its bullets? Can you blame a man when his mother was the bully who wreaked havoc on a land as if bullets had no targets?
Oh, that's very cool. Yeah, thanks for sharing that, triolet. I was thinking about writing a triolet myself, or maybe I was thinking as I was reading it, this should be a triolet instead. So thanks, that's really cool.
Oh, thank you. Well, you know, I just want to say about triolets is that, or this prompt is that you're dealing with pictures, that supposedly of somebody you don't know. And so it's very hard, either the person, like a lot of these poems tonight, either they went into the history because they knew about the history, or they, I think this at least allows you to write something succinct about the photograph.
Yeah. Well, very good. Well, thanks for sharing that, Carla.
Thank
that was
you.
Great. Yeah. That's Triquarterly for Netanyahu by Carla Schwartz. And last, but not least, is Dick Westheimer. Hey, Dick.
Hey, Tim. So I'll be very quick. I did send you two versions. Use the second version because the photograph is on the second page.
Gotcha.
And
yep, I see. Use this one. That's very helpful. I appreciate it.
All right, in big caps. And I had a question. How's your concussion?
Oh, it was fine. It was one day I had a headache and a little nausea, and after that I was totally fine. So there was really no big deal. But and the scar is healing really nicely thanks to Katie's scar tape that she got me from Amazon, which is much appreciated.
So I was a big fan of the black and white portrait photographers, especially the ones that came out of the Farm Security Administration.
Mm-hmm.
Like,
yeah, me too. I love those archives too. There's so many you can just go through, and I guess it's the Smithsonian or wherever it is. I don't remember. I've looked through many times at those portraits.
And they're all public domain.
Yeah.
So you can put them on, and Walker Evans, and then I love Diane Arbus coming later with her amazing black and white photographs. So this one I chose. This was a Dorothea Lange, and I took a deep dive into it. And I think the only thing that I'll say first is that it went about 40 years before the identity of the person in the photograph was known, or was known to anybody but the woman in the photograph, who damn well knew who she was.
Yeah.
So,
and this is that famous photograph of the woman, she's sitting with two small children. I mean, if you see it, you recognize it. I don't know how to describe it in a way that radio listeners can remember, but if you saw it, you'd know it.
So, Ode to a Mother Remembering Stars in memory of Florence Owens Thompson. America needs a body to hide its hunger in, a goat laid on the Wall Street altar. An unnamed woman will do. Dress her children in rags, furrow her face, place her in a shambled shack and pretend it is a manger. Under the Parthenon of her brow, she is Athena who promised to protect. She is a woman who can't forget the grime. She is the stars thirsting in the sky. She is her hunger for home. She is Helen, she is Troy, and she is the walls destroyed. And now she is the ship on her way to Ithaca, where she can eat again without tasting dust. And the rest of us, America prefers she not have a name. We'll call her Migrant Mother, worship her like a second commandment sin, a goddess of forgiving us our trespasses. Her name is Miss Thompson, Florence to her kin. In the distance she sees anything but us.
Another poem with a great last line, Dick. I love that ending. There's so many great endings today. Yeah. Thanks for bringing that portrait photograph to life.
Right, and Dorothea Lange got all the facts wrong about who it was. Didn't know
really?
Published it even though she didn't have permission. Became very famous and well known about it. And the woman resented it until weeks before she died, and her kids convinced her that so many poverty, that the photograph drew attention to the poverty in such a way. And the mother Florence gave her forgiveness to Dorothea Lange.
Yeah. Oh, wow. Very interesting. Yeah. Interesting to hear that backstory. It's as it so often is with those famous photographs, that everyone's seen.
Almost
so
all
much
of them.
Backstory.
Almost all of those wonderful Farm Security Administration photographs were brought with, how do we use these without exploiting the people?
Yeah, definitely. Really interesting poem. Thanks for sharing that, Dick.
Yeah, thanks. Bye-bye.
Yep. Yeah, it was Dick Westheimer with Ode to a Mother Remembering Stars. Good, cool title, too. And let's do Ted Guevara's. And Ted, of course, always has something interesting photographic anyway. He comes with a black and white photograph here of a gentleman in a full suit skating, as you see, on a skateboard down what's probably Central Park, maybe. So that is the photograph. He's got a top hat and some glasses, too. And here is Ted's poem, Fall Park. There is no bluff in my cards. I'm laying them down all for you to see, because 2 of your age can fit into mine, maybe 3. I'm giving you control while I roll by, distant and admiring. The revolving world told me I'm done spinning, but all your issues I've taken, your singularity in the streets. Parents have vanished, siblings have parted. There is no bluff in my cards. I bend your woes into my want. I puncture my soul, and out comes new life. These gloves I fit in, not found in that average street. Yet their stitches are older than any clothes you have worn, maybe as scarce as your invisible mother's. Sweet orphan, I am your absence now. Your sad stories turned into song, then urge, then that hill where men like me trip and fall. Still, when your pain becomes my ache for you, I cannot fold, I let it ride. I waste pride and attitude, disown all that hinders. Cliché is a park with unusual gravity and a new meaning. And there was Fall Park by Ted Bernal Guevara. Thanks for sharing that poem and a photograph too. Very interesting combination. And now it is time for the Sciku. And the Sciku this week is based on this story. I think everyone's probably heard of that whole, if 1,000 monkeys were writing, tapping on a typewriter, they would write Shakespeare eventually, So it turns out somebody actually did the math in a study here from, where is this? UTS. What's UTS? I don't even know. The University of, it doesn't say anywhere. Some UTS University, Australian Technology Network? No, that's not it. Anyway, whatever it is, did a study here, and they actually did the math of whether or not monkeys would write Shakespeare. And the story is right here. It is not to be. Universe too short for Shakespeare typing monkeys. And it turns out even if you had every monkey on the planet Earth living forever, writing on a typewriter forever until the cold death of the universe as all the matter splits apart, there would not be enough time for any monkey to produce Shakespeare. Although, interestingly, one monkey, if he sat in the desk for his whole life, which is about 20 or so years, I think, in the wild for a monkey, they would type the word banana at some point. So that was an interesting detail from the article, too. And here is the Sciku inspired by that article. Here we go. Tap, tap, tap at the typewriter, his obituary. Tap, tap, tap at the typewriter, his obituary. That is your Sciku for the week, and that is the show for this week. Let's go to our prompt poems editor, Katie Dozier. So, Katie, what do you have for us as far as a prompt next week?
I have that you muted me as I unmuted myself. So.
I meant to ask you to mute because I thought you were waiting for it to pop up, and then anyway.
No, there are great poems tonight. I definitely enjoyed listening downstairs with the girls, so that was wonderful. And okay, so for the next prompt, I wanted a bit of a challenge, right? Because you and I will be at a reading, right, on Sunday, so there will not be a Rattlecast,
yeah,
right?
We'll be at the Maple something bar in New Orleans, I think, right when the Rattlecast is going on.
Sounds
Maple
good to
Leaf.
me.
Yeah,
Possibly
Maple Leaf
with
bar.
a hurricane, by the way, because there might be some action on our road
Really?
trip.
I did not know that.
Yeah.
We intentionally did this road trip in November so there wouldn't be a hurricane.
Surprise!
Oops.
Maybe not. I don't know.
Well, check out the forecast after the show.
So we have more time, right? So I wanted a challenge. There's a prompt I've wanted to do for a while because some of my favorite poems are this style. So the prompt is going to be, and again, because we have 2 weeks, right? Write a braid poem in which 3 or more stories are woven together. So this is a form that I'm going to credit with David Kirby, who not coincidentally we'll be seeing when we speak at FSU. He was one of my former professors, so that's why it was kind of on my brain, I think. And because I think braid poems are absolutely amazing. My favorite is of David Kirby's is The Fates, but I may want to make sure I get the title right of the other one.
Yeah.
So More Than This.
Yeah, that was in Best American Poetry, I think, for Brown.
Yeah, and that's a phenomenal poem and a Rattle Poetry Prize finalist. And I wanted to say too, with that poem, his author's note was, a lot of my poems are braids I make of found materials. My contribution is to figure out what the different parts have in common and then unite them tonally. In this case, there are 3 threads. So then it kind of goes on from there. But the idea is that we're kind of hunting around for stories And then the poem is a way to explore what the connection is without going in knowing it, because that will make for a weak braid. And I should know because I'm not great at braiding my daughter's hair. So,
well, I've never braided hair, so I might be terrible at this one. But I'm trying to think of anything I've done similar. Some boondoggle in Cub Scouts. Does that, I don't know if that counts?
No idea. But it's gonna be I have never written this kind of poem before. And it's definitely a more time-consuming one. And we were also saying, while in general, as you did a great job of, we're going to have to be strict with the one-page limit, this is the kind of poem that it shockingly, I've never said this before, naturally lends itself to being a longer poem. So for that particular prompt lines, after having the week off from the Rattlecast, we're not going to have a max. Now, Zachary Honeycutt, that does not mean you're going to come read your 5-page fiction piece.
I think we're going to have to say like some kind of max though. Now that I think about it, like maybe 3 pages.
Right. We're going to have to figure out some kind of max. And we do want to be respectful, of course, of your time in particular. But I just don't want people to start working on their braids and be like, but it has to be 1 page. Because admittedly, these tend to be longer poems. However, bonus points if you get it into a page.
Oh,
for sure.
Okay. Well, we love bonus points around. Well, awesome. That's going to be a lot of fun, Katie. Thanks so much for that prompt, and looking forward to next week too, when we are going on our road trip, doing a lot of readings and stuff. Yeah,
a lot of readings. Yep, I'm going to be practicing on Lizzie and Charlotte before you get back here.
Yeah. So. Well, I'm looking forward to that, and then in the car too, on the self-driving mode.
Yeah, we're gonna do that, and we've got to do the Rainbow Road mode where it makes it looks like a rainbow out in front of you.
Yeah, Katie's got a Tesla, and so that's what we're driving down to.
Driving into the hurricane with a glass roof.
Sounds good. All right. Well, thanks so much, Katie. Definitely
very
always
much.
fun. Yeah.
Thanks. Bye.
All right. Yeah, that was Katie Dozier, our associate editor at Rattle, with the prompt for 2 weeks from now. And now, as we mentioned, we're not going to have a show next week. What we are going to do is what we've done in the past sometimes. And next week, we're going to air live my conversation with Ani DeFranco, which was recorded for the fall issue of Rattle, the tribute to musicians, on May 23rd, 2024 back then. We're just going to release that as an episode. So if you want to like hang out in the chat and watch it with everybody else, that's a lot of fun. No prompt, though. It's just going to be the hour-long interview. We'll post that live like we did with the Ian McGilchrist, too. And Ani does, though. You'll enjoy this. Not included in the interview. She did read a poem at the end of that recording. And so we'll air that, too. Ani DeFranco reading a poem live for us as she was in her studio apartment waiting for the next Broadway play, because she was in a Broadway play at the time. Anyway, that was a lot of fun with me, Ani DeFranco. Next week, November 10th, we'll be out of town. We'll be doing that. And then the guest after that is going to be, in 2 weeks, Brodie Parrish Craig. And Brodie's been in Poets Respond, a really interesting poet. A lot of things to talk about there. Their new book is The Patient is an Unreliable Historian. So we'll check that out. Rattlecast number 269. You have 2 weeks until this episode and 2 weeks to write your braid, which I'm excited about too. I haven't written a braid myself, so that's going to be a lot of fun. That's Rattlecast number 269, 2 weeks from tonight, Sunday, November 17th. The regular time, though, 8 p.m. Eastern, 5 p.m. Pacific. Hope to see you there. Hope you have a great 2 weeks in the meantime. And enjoy Ani DeFranco, too. And we'll talk to you later. Good night.